On May 17th, 2021, it was announced that the Owl House was renewed for a third season, which would also be the final season of the series, consisting of 3 special-length episodes that serve as a conclusion to the Owl House as a TV series. According to Dana Terrace, this is a shortened order from our expected 10 to 20 episode pickup. It was unexpected. 3 44-minute specials means an event we otherwise wouldn't have done with a different kind of order. It's definitely not an ideal situation for any showrunner or any storyteller to be in, to have the pieces in place to gradually tell your story over 60 or so episodes, only to have the suits come in and tell you 2/3 of the way through that the third season you've been excited to dig into, yeah, you're only getting a third of that. Suffice to say, the crew was under immense pressure to deliver a satisfactory conclusion to the series. And while it's clear season 2 was tweaked to set up these specials to the best of its ability, especially in the back half of the season, I think there's only so much they could have done in any scenario to make this transition perfect. Now, here we are, almost 2 years since the announcement of season 3, with 2 of the specials out in the world. So today, I'm here to answer the question, is the Owl House season 3 living up to the hype? Reviewing the 2 specials currently available to figure out if this season is taking advantage of the 44+ minute format to the absolute fullest. Has this season, so far, been a good send-off to the many characters and locations we've become acquainted with over the last 3 years? And are we in store for one of the greatest Disney TVA finales of all time? I'm also including the season 3 breakdowns and a video or 2 we've made around the season so far, so this video will kind of be the quintessential Owl House season 3 experience until the final episode makes it dated. And if you're thinking, shouldn't you wait for the finale to air before reviewing the season? My answer is, in this economy? Ha! No thanks to them. Kicking things off with the first special, thanks to them, we pick up directly in the aftermath of season 2's finale, as Luz, Amity, Gus, Willow, and Hunter are separated from their family and friends and are stranded on Earth, shortly after the all-powerful Collector was unleashed onto the Demon Realm. So, with us spending the entirety of this special on Earth, there are a lot of things that it needs to check off its list to get the most out of this setting and properly set up the other specials. You gotta check in with these characters and how they're feeling, establish motivations for the final battle, shed light on Luz's home life and social standing, explore Luz's relationship with her mother, give V some time to shine, teach us more about Emperor Bells' history in Graysfield, alongside the town's inclination towards magic, explain what exactly this abandoned house is, condense an entire arc on Earth to just 44 minutes, and also be a good Halloween special, I guess? Yeah, that's a lot to juggle in a short amount of time, and I think thanks to them manages to pull most of this off pretty well. When this special first aired, a lot of my friends called it one of, if not the best episode of the Owl House so far, and I think that boils down to 2 factors, character work and pacing, going hand in hand to make an episode worth remembering. This episode shows that the Owl House can work really well in an hour-long format, giving us plenty of intimate moments with the characters, mainly Luz and Hunter, without feeling like it's ever stalling or wasting time. They may make it a little obvious on what's going to happen next, but that's as worse as it gets in my opinion. Much like the back half of season 2, Luz and Hunter are the stars of this episode, and rightfully so, establishing right off the bat that Luz is still beating herself up over helping Bellows find the Collector through time travel shenanigans, alongside feeling responsible for her friends being stranded on Earth, while Hunter is coming to terms with being a Grimwalker, Bellows' brother, Caleb Whittabay. The 2 of them on edge as they hide these revelations and emotions from their friends. All the while, Bellows has survived the Collector's vicious game of tag, sustaining what little remains of himself through possession of the local wildlife. I adore the montage we get that doubles as this episode's theme song. As someone who grew up on shows like Samurai Jack, I eat sequences like these up. Show don't tell is a concept that is harder to get away with in an age of higher-ups wanting to dumb everything down for an audience, especially on a network like Disney Channel. So while this isn't exactly peak storytelling, I do appreciate what they managed to establish in just a few minutes. Luz is consumed with guilt and slowly losing her momentum as attempts at a portal to the Demon Realm feel more and more hopeless. Hunter is getting haunted by visions of his uncle, which is clearly taking a toll on him. The boy almost makes himself Coconut Head before Willow's stylish expertise saves the day. Flapjack's clearly trying to find something in the old abandoned house, letting you know that'll be important. The kids clearly long for their families, but keep their spirits high by distracting themselves with Earth's culture, and Camila doing her best to not only be a supportive mother to Luz, but going above and beyond to accommodate 5 extra kids in her household. there's one thing that sticks out to people about this special, I imagine it's the way the writers fixed Camila as a character. To be frank, Camila was far from a fan favorite during the first 2 seasons of the show. A lot of people felt like she was way too hard on Luz and not really understanding of her daughter's feelings. That it was cruel to send Luz to a summer camp designed to stifle her hyperactive personality so that she can blend in amongst her peers and be seen as normal. And I'm sure Luz's rampant fear of her mother's disapproval didn't do any favors, especially to anyone who that might have resonated with, like me. Now, personally, I never had a strong opinion about Camila either way, because she barely had any screen time to make an impression. Not enough moments prior that let her personality shine. Though I will say, the fact she was down for keeping V in the house after finding out she's a basilisk and not her daughter was always a testament to how good of a caretaker she actually is. I don't blame her for having some kind of intervention with Luz after Luz unleashed spiders and snakes upon her classmates. But I do think sending her to a place straight up called Reality Check Camp was harsh and not the appropriate response. But hey, as we learn in these 2 specials, apparently Camila feels the same way. Thanks to them reframes Camila's character in a way that draws parallels to Ida's own mother, Gwendolyn. When we were introduced to Gwendolyn last season, we learned that the root of her estranged relationship with Ida was Ida's curse. Or more so, how Gwendolyn reacted to the curse. For literal decades, Gwendolyn viewed the curse as something to be ashamed of, wasting so many resources in a string of endless attempts to cure her daughter, while Ida knew it was something she would just have to live with. This curse is a part of her now, and she's learned to embrace it, to work with it. Although Gwendolyn had good intentions, she never took her daughter's own feelings into account, and instead of meeting her halfway, she forced the wrong solutions onto her. Solutions that were never going to work. And it's only after she acknowledges all of this, coming to her senses, that she's able to mend her relationship with Ida, accepting her daughter for who she is. If you swap Gwendolyn and Ida for Camila and Luz, you'll realize that these 2 are very similar conflicts at their core. Camila clearly has a lot of love and a lot of concern for her daughter. And as we begin to uncover in this special, she also used to be a huge nerd. But this nerdom came at the price of social status, as Camila was bullied by her peers. Something that Luz's principal throws back in Camila's face, as it's revealed Reality Check Camp was actually his solution to Luz's issues in school and with socializing, pressuring Camila with the possibility that Luz herself would start to get bullied if drastic measures aren't taken. Gwendolyn and Camila let other people decide what was best for their children without ever communicating with them and figuring out how they feel, despite Ida and Luz being the ones who actually have to deal with all of this firsthand. And both of these mothers regret these decisions once they see that they, frankly, were only making things worse. But it's not like Camila was never in Luz's corner. We see her push back against numerous parents who mocked Luz throughout her childhood. Camila always adored Luz's quirks and creativity. She truly loves her daughter for who she is. She just couldn't help but worry that these quirks would cost Luz her education and a fulfilling social life. Which I like how this special makes it a point to show that Luz would have eventually found the right crowd if she stayed on Earth, as she's approached by classmates who actually dug her outbursts in class, viewing the outbursts as a critique on the historical figures taught in their learning curriculum. These classmates also mentioned that, despite being new, they heard all about Luz and clearly want to get to know her better because they find her quirks to be cool. The nightmare sequence that conveys all this information about Camila to us was fantastic, by the way. There's a great use of multiple color palettes that convey how Camila looks back on what should have been treasured memories, but they were tainted by the judgmental parents who wrote off Luz as degenerate. And as someone who's neurodivergent and grew up with my own difficulties in school on an educational and social level, with only my mom in the household, I gotta point out that Camila was truly doing her best as a single parent. That shit isn't easy. And obviously, Luz's struggles in school would have an effect on her, because Camila might internalize it as, oh god, I'm a bad parent. I'm failing my kid. It makes sense why she would fold and listen to the wrong advice on parenting. And all the while, she's still grieving her husband Manny, I'm sure. Someone who we learn was also a big nerd. He was more than likely the first person in Camila's life that adored her nerdiness and indulged in these hobbies with her, which makes his passing all the more heartbreaking. Thanks to them and For the Future both do a great job at making Camila a multifaceted character, allowing us to not only sympathize with her, but understand the choices she made in the beginning of the series. She just wanted to avoid having her daughter go through what she went through. Not to mention, she's pretty fun to watch. Whether if it's on Earth or in the demon realm, she constantly had me grinning from ear to ear every time I watch these specials. A great addition to the cast, who I can't wait to see more of. Give Camila a spin-off. She's a vet, right? Give her some Dr. Dolittle shenanigans to get into. If there's one character in the Owl House that got robbed by the Short in Order more than anyone, it's V. Being introduced in Season 2 with only one major appearance, her character being relegated to Earth, it was obvious that they were saving her for a proper Gracefield arc in Season 3, but things just didn't pan out that way. I've always been fond of V for the simple fact that she's voiced by Michaela Dietz, aka Amethyst from Steven Universe, and I was curious how they were going to handle her character in this special, if they would try to fit in an arc for her like they did with Camila. Unfortunately, we didn't get that. Instead, the show tries to meet us halfway and jump to the conclusion of V's arc that a normal Season 3 would have brought us to naturally. She has her own identity, rocking a human Sona. She gains a new love interest after some flirtation with the new leader of the Gracefield Historical Society, Masha, and by the end of the episode, she's content with staying on Earth, as she's formed a life here and isn't ready to return to the Boiling Isles quite yet, as there's a lot of fear and pain associated with her time there. Although they couldn't do much with V due to limited time, I thought it was smart that, since she's been living in this town for a few months, she's essentially the guide for Amity, Willow, Gus, and Hunter. Not to mention, she's the one who realizes an identical map of Old Gracefield lies in the Historical Society, leading them to the Titan's Blood, and thus giving them the biggest breakthrough in returning back home. So make no mistake, despite only having like 10 lines, V is the MVP. We also see her in combat for a split second, using her ability to drain magic as an offense, which may or may not have set Bellows back in stabilizing his current condition. I'm disappointed she presumably won't be a part of the final battle, but they gave her a pretty damn good reason to stay behind. Trust me, as someone who moved across the country to evade trauma, it took a lot of courage to visit home for the first time. I hope we get more of V, but if this is the last time she's in the spotlight, I'm glad they made an effort to give her something. As I said earlier, Luz and Hunter are the stars of this special. As they find themselves stranded in Gracefield, they both have to confront the aftermath of being pawns in Bellows' game, as the audience uncovers their origins. Luz is in a position where she feels responsible for the Collector being freed and the circumstances everyone's found themselves in, while Hunter fears he lacks a true identity and is nothing more than an off-brand Caleb Whittabane. That he was meant to mindlessly obey Bellows, an asset to an endless cycle of hatred and bigotry. And neither of them do a very good job of coping. Now here's a hot take. While I admire the writers for balancing out the focus on Luz and Hunter in this special, I think instead of them having the spotlight 50-50, it should have been more like 40% Luz and 60% Hunter. And that's mainly because, in the grand scheme of the show, the narrative's been pretty direct about how Luz has been feeling since the end of Hollow Mind, to the point where I don't know if we needed the special to hammer it in as much as it did. Luz hates that she showed Bellows the light glyph, setting many things into motion, and has started to resent herself for it, especially after trying to get Bellows to stop the draining spell to no avail. If the Collector didn't save them, the spell would have kept going. Luz failed, no matter how things were going to shake out. All of her life, she wanted to feel accepted. She wanted a sense of belonging, and she finally got that in the demon realm. But because of everything that's happened, she feels like she's really messed up her loved ones' lives. She thinks she ruined the community she's built up, so she makes the decision to stay on Earth and never return to the Boiling Isles, once she's able to get her friends back there safe and sound. But like, how is Hunter feeling about everything? The show hasn't been subtle about Luz's feelings, but it feels like they've really held back on diving into Hunter's mental health. After Hollow Mind, he ran off and didn't appear again until Labyrinth Runners, where he actively avoided talking about the dark truth behind his inception. And every appearance since then, we've just kind of been retreading that he's scared of Bellows and doesn't want to think about the fact he's a Grimwalker. This episode reestablishes his fear of Bellows, but it does almost nothing in resolving his identity crisis. They lean into the idea that Hunter's happier on Earth, happier being a normal teenager who doesn't have to worry about the Emperor's Coven, but without addressing the elephant in the room, it feels like there's something missing. This is where I also feel like Gus was underutilized in this episode. But what else is new? We have Gus low-key trying to push Hunter into talking about being a Grimwalker through the Cosmic Frontier books he finds, as one of the characters in this book is actually a clone. But I wish the two learn more about Caleb together. Maybe they discover old entries written by Caleb in the Historical Society, find little bits and pieces of his influence across the town. Why? Because Hunter just thinks he's a clone of a witch hunter. But we know Caleb was able to fight against indoctrination and value a witch's life. I think it would have made Gus finally interacting with Earth culture all the more satisfying, while giving Hunter the assurance that even though he's a clone of Bellows' brother, that brother was a pretty good dude, giving Hunter all the more strength to fight off Bellows' possession later in the episode. But without that moment for Hunter, we're left with him just being consumed by paranoia and guilt for most of the episode. And it's not like that doesn't have any payoff. It leads to that really sweet moment where Luz comforts him in the basement of the abandoned house. But it's not the proper development he needed before returning to the Isles, in my opinion. Most of the episode, I'm just waiting for Bellows to possess him. But if they gave him some substantial development prior to the possession, aside from his breakdown, it would have made that moment all the more heartbreaking, and maybe would have even caught the audience off guard. Don't get me wrong. I understand him fighting off the possession and finally standing up to Bellows is his big moment in the episode. I just wish they let him learn a little more about Caleb and had him open up a bit to make that moment feel even bigger than it was. For Hunter to stand up for not only himself, but for Caleb too. Now, all of this isn't to say I didn't care for what they did manage to do with Luz and Hunter in this episode, and I understand they're working with limited time. One of my favorite moments by far is Luz's video diary. Learning that her love for the Good Witch Azora franchise has actually been an extension of the love she has for her dad, as the very first book served as a parting gift from him. And the way Camila caresses the screen is a tug on my heartstrings every single time. And I think one of the most important points this episode got across through the scene is that Luz is applying herself, just not to the curriculum that all students are expected to follow. Over the years, there has been more conversation around the difficulties neurodivergent students face than ever before. So I'm glad they took the time to say, hey, you're not stupid. The problem isn't that you're not trying hard enough. The problem is the system expects every student to fit the mold, despite the fact that a lot of our brains are wired differently. I have such a strong love for this scene, and it is oh so vital in understanding Luz Noceda. Of course, I also have to mention how this episode dealt Hunter his greatest loss yet. When Flapjack was introduced into the narrative, it was clear that the Palisman was marked for death. A mysterious affinity for Hunter and hints around Gracefield made a strong case for Flapjack, formerly belonging to Caleb. And as Bellows' condition worsened, with Palisman and Palistrom Wood running low, it was obvious how this was going to end. Flapjack was Hunter's first true friend. And while a part of me wishes his final episode wasn't full of a possessed Hunter snapping at him, I do think Flapjack sacrificing himself and becoming one with Hunter was the perfect bittersweet ending to this character. Rest easy, buddy. Prior to the premiere, thanks to them, I was surprised to see how prominent Bellows was in the special's key art. I was just expecting him to remain a goopy pile of soup that would possess the characters before being defeated on Earth. But seeing his monster form here solidified that he's not throwing in the towel just yet. And while I can now accept the special for what it is, when I first watched, I was slightly disappointed because again, it's a pseudo-Halloween special. It premiered around Halloween time. Halloween happens in the episode. Yet I feel like I didn't get a Halloween vibe. Bellows is the driving force of this episode's dark undertones, but I was waiting for those undertones to become the tone. And that doesn't really happen until he fully possesses Hunter. Like every time he possessed an animal, we either only saw the aftermath of said possession or it happened in the distance, shrouded in the silhouette. Ultimately, I think Disney's standards and practices is responsible for this episode feeling kinda sanitized, but every time I've rewatched it since then, without the expectations I had going into the episode, I dug the moments with Bellows they were able to get away with. The design for his possession of Hunter, or Bunter as I call him, is sick as hell. Seriously, it makes me wish the Owl House was a little edgier and a lot longer, and instead of this being a possession, it was more of a Black Suit Spider-Man Curse Mark Sasuke situation, where he leaned into this power without really understanding what it is or how it's affecting him. The fight scene we got is some of the best animation the show has ever seen, And I love seeing all of the kids work together in another attempt to take Bellows down. I already touched on V's little moment in this fight, but her ability to drain magic seriously makes me think she would have made a huge difference fighting against him during the Day of Unity. I was hoping being in Graysfield would teach us more about Bellows, and I got what I was looking for within the haunted hayride scene, as the hayride depicts Bellows' true origins. How he was the younger brother who looked up to Caleb as the two were orphaned and alone before settling in Graysfield. Bellows, or Philip, felt like Caleb was all he had, so when Evelyn came into the picture, it makes sense that Philip felt threatened by her. The reality of the situation is, Bellows thinks Caleb was taken away from him, but deep down he knows Caleb made a conscious decision in staying with Evelyn. The grudge he formed against them became the real driving force behind his desire to eradicate all of witch kind, a grudge that's on full display in the climax of this episode, as he refers to both Evelyn and Caleb as if they were alive, projecting onto the kids, despite Evelyn and Caleb being dead for a very long time. His determination to reach his goal is something I haven't seen from a Disney villain in a very long time, and we get a lot more of that determination in the next special. So far, Season 3's off to a solid start. Again, there are some things I think should have been prioritized over others, but for what they managed to fit in 44 minutes, I still believe they did a damn good job. Let's take a moment to not only celebrate the Owl House, but you guys, and your awesome art with our fan spotlight. Want your art featured in the next big Owl House video? Tag us in your submissions on Twitter or Instagram. Thank you for your continued support. So whereas Thanks to Them was a special I was slightly underwhelmed by at first, but grew to love more and more over time, For the Future is a special that I loved the first time around. But admittedly, I find it a bit underwhelming the more I rewatch it. This isn't to say it's a bad special, or that I didn't enjoy it, I just think it has some missed potential and some pretty obvious flaws. It's a little too comfortable being the middle part of this trilogy. It feels like the writers went into this knowing where it needed to end, with the kids arriving within the skull of the Titan just in time for the Collector to unleash his salt. And while the B and C stories with King and Bellows managed to stay pretty engaging throughout the special, the A story with Luz and the crew starts off strong, but as soon as Hexside is introduced, drags. But let's run through some positives. Starting with that awesome cold open. The Boiling Isles continues to have the worst day ever, as the Collector is now free from his interdimensional prison, ready to play a game of Owl House. Wanting King all to themselves, and threatened by Lilith and Hootie's instigation, Collector wastes no time transforming those who oppose him into puppets. NPCs for his little role-playing game, being kept storage within the Collector's proclaimed Owl House, a castle in the sky. At first, I was a little let down by the reveal of this castle, and it's purely my fault for spending months speculating on what it could be. But as soon as I realized that this castle is a crown atop of the Titan's head, I was pulled right back in. Seriously, I love the look of the Titan in this special. Speaking of love, as Ida prepares to confront the Collector, Rain gets a good look at her Harpy form for the very first time. And the way their eyes light up at the sight of her melted my heart. Seriously, I'm not big on shipping, but I cannot get enough of Rada. The Collector transforms the Isles into a colorful yet creepy wonderland, while Ida's in hot pursuit. But as soon as she gets a good look at the Collector, her curse begins to flare up. The popular interpretation being that the Albies recognizing a Collector upset it so much that it was able to take over, and it was only infuriated further by the Collector's invitation to play a game. I hope this isn't all we're going to get in relation to that flashback, as a moment in the finale where Ida helps the Albies keep composure long enough to defeat the Collector, or at least gain the upper hand, would be a great way to cap off this through line. While we're on the topic of long-running plot threads in the Owl House, I was pleasantly surprised to see Luz's story in this special kick off in the in-between realm. I thought we would never see this place again, due to time constraints and the Collector no longer being confined to a prison. When Luz first stumbled into this place back in yesterday's Lie, fans were quick to pick up on there being whispers that seemed to be calling out to Luz. Now we know these whispers are likely the spirits of Titans, as one seems to approach her, but she's pulled right back out before this Titan could speak with her. Hey, plot hook for the finale. Also, I just need to gush about how good this episode looks. The line art on the characters feel a bit more bold. There's constant character acting going on. There's a lot of camera movements sprinkled throughout that punch up even the smallest scenes. The backgrounds are extremely detailed. The color palettes are vibrant. It all does a great job of capturing the audience attention for the full 48 minutes. I mean, just look at this moment where Amity's showing off her abomination magic. It's so simple but fantastic. Not to mention, these final designs for the characters are brilliant. I saw a handful of fans felt some type of way about the kids still wearing their Halloween costumes, but with a lot of the Halloween accessories removed, they're obviously so much more than that. Luz dressed as Azura is on the nose but well earned, as in the beginning of the series, she aspired to become a great witch, and now as the most proficient user of glyph magic, she's accomplished just that. And when I say most proficient, I mean like living, just in case some lore proves me wrong down the road. Guz's costume bears a strong resemblance to Adrian Gray's outfit, shoulder pads, magic amplifier and all, just with a different color palette. And I think this represents his proficiency in illusion magic. Willow's costume, without the bat hat, clearly evokes the imagery of a plant. Amity's dress has a crescent moon pattern across the bottom, an evolution of the crescent moon necklace she wore in season 2, which in itself has always been a reference to enchanting Gromfrite and her first dance with Luz. And Hunter, well, he's wearing a meme shirt, but just pretend I said something profound about wolves. As they return to the Owl House, everyone is either depressed or extremely on edge, with Willow having a little bit of the spotlight in this episode as they touch on something that hasn't really been mentioned since season 1. Willow's tendency to bottle all of her negative emotions up because although she's usually the shoulder for her friends to cry on, she doesn't want to be vulnerable herself, lest she feel like her own baggage would weigh down those around her. Also, I forgot to mention this in the breakdown proper, but Hunter tries reaching for his staff when he hears a rustling in the bushes, and that absolutely rips my heart into two. After the gang briefly splits up to have some heart-to-heart convos, all of which I enjoyed and thought were poignant moments, Hunter alerts them that he saw King and Ida. Wasting no time to follow this lead, they track them down to Bonesboro's town square, only to find... Heading into this second special, I think the character most people were excited to see more of was the Collector, as he made quite the impression in King's Tide after being freed by his new BFF. And to be honest, the further I watched, the more it felt like there was a shift in tone with his character. He's still, as King puts it, scary and powerful, but scared and alone. Yet the approach feels different. I hope this makes sense. Whereas before, the Collector felt like a misguided kid who had a habit of intentionally causing harm to others. They kind of flipped the script for most of this episode where he's just misguided, and the destruction he causes is unintentional. In fact, he evidently detests violence and prefers being able to just play. Basically, he's not as intimidating as he was before. Like throughout Season 2B, Collector suggested that Bellows should create another Grimwalker, while teasing Bellows with the notion that he enjoys destroying them. The Collector was fully aware that the Day of Unity would wipe out every witch on the Boiling Isles, which kinda goes against what we learned in this episode, but you can just chalk that up to bad influence. Upon gaining freedom, he immediately flattened Bellows like a pancake in a game of tag, rightfully so, and then turned to the gang and said, "You look slow too," before King stopped things from escalating further. You can make the argument that this was a Collector who was in prison for who knows how long and needed to blow off some steam because of it, but if that's the case, I'm not sure if he would soften up this quickly. He went from Spinel to Spinel. And obviously the lore and interactions in this episode makes it clear that the Collector was the odd one out from the rest of his people. That at his core, he prefers playing together over conflict and looks at that war between Collectors and Titans with great shame. But I walked away feeling like this was an adjustment to his character rather than death being added to them. Whether it was of the writer's own volition, or because of interference from the higher-ups, it feels like the Collector was made to be a little bit more lighthearted in this episode, so that he could come across as more likable to the audience. It feels like there was some fear that, if he remained intimidating, viewers would lose sympathy for him. But it causes his depiction in this episode to feel just a smidge inconsistent. He's still a loose cannon without feeling like a loose cannon, which is not as entertaining. If he murked Bellows with a smile on his face, which gave me chills, you'd think he'd be absolutely terrifying in this special when he's pissed off. But whenever he's upset in this episode, prior to the final few minutes, it's kinda just played as a joke. Like when he turned Terra Snapdragon into a puppet, or demanded more pizza bagels from Odalia. Which, by the way, how the hell did Terra and Odalia both apparently evade being turned into puppets? It actually makes no sense. If we assume all the Coven heads were transformed because they had no time to wake up and fight back between the draining spell and the Collector's takeover, then why was Terra the lucky one here? Is it just because she looks the most like Ida, and the story needed Luz to see a reenactment of one of her adventures? Terra clearly has never been turned into a puppet before, so it really sounds like the Collector just somehow missed. If you do just want to have one of the Coven heads survive for the sake of getting turned into a puppet at this moment, why not have it be Darius? Someone the audience generally likes and has really warmed up to. Someone we wouldn't want to see be turned into a puppet, thus adding to the Collector's intimidation factor. When he, as an antagonist, is only punishing people the audience already hates, at least on screen, it doesn't really do anything effective. If they spun it in a way where Ida and the Coven heads try to get the jump on Collector, pushing him into a corner where he feels like he can't trust anyone who isn't King, it would have made more sense. But in the final product, it just feels like it happened just because he was so excited over his newfound freedom that he literally burst, transforming the Boiling Isles and unleashing the all-seeing eyes. The puppet thing in general feels like it should work really well, and it's not like it doesn't work, it just feels like a thing that happens, so that, ultimately, Bellows could possess Rain. Also, I hate the misunderstanding trope with a passion, and for a show that's done a great job at subverting tropes, my jaw dropped at the fact that they went with such an easy route for the Collector to switch up. Again, it reads more like they needed this episode to end in a certain place, and it didn't really matter how they reached it. I know this section is, way more negative than I intended. And to be clear, it's not like I don't like the Collector as a character anymore. I do. There were plenty of moments I enjoyed with him in the episode. Those moments were just overshadowed by everything else I had gripes with. And if you feel differently about it, feel free to drop your own analysis in the comments down below. Alright, so I honestly don't want to repeat too much from what I said in the breakdown for this episode, so I just want to run through some thoughts I have on the adult characters and their roles in this episode, starting with Ida and Lilith. Honestly, the cold open led me to believe that Ida was going to have a much bigger role in this episode than she actually did. One of the credit illustrations revealed that King showed a lot of concern for Ida while she was transformed as the Owl Beast, which the Collector bore witness to, and as a result, let her get away without being turned into a puppet. Presumably, he turned Lilith back to normal afterwards, as King convinced Collector that they need Lilith around to take care of Ida while they hang. So Ida spends a lot of this episode in her own little nest within the castle. But like, during that scene in the town square, Collector described Ida as a cool ant. Even as a meta joke, that means Ida passes the Collector's vibe check. I feel like we missed out on Ida hanging out with the Collector while trying to keep her curse at bay. She's definitely chaotic enough and ballsy enough to go along with the Collector's games, at least for a little while. And I mean, she's one of the best characters in the show. Seeing her and Lilith sidelined for the episode was definitely a downer. We also have to wait until the finale for her and King to reunite with Luz, which isn't like a deal breaker or anything. But again, with how this episode was paced, I feel like it could have happened a little sooner. But I guess I need to see how the reunion actually happens in the next special. But enough about Bird Mom. Let's talk about Earth Mom. Camila was fantastic in this special. Her voice actress really sold all of her reactions to the Boiling Isles.
Oh, hello, sweet Earth.
And I love how a few of them paralleled Luz's reaction to the Isles back in the pilot. It was heartwarming seeing her try to get Willow to open up. And I love how she doesn't hesitate to kick some ass, even trying to use a glyph in the heat of the moment. Even though it didn't work out, it showed how she was willing to put her life on the line in order to protect Luz and the others. And it sets up a successful glyph attempt in the finale. Perhaps with a bat? And her big moment with Luz that accumulates and Luz's talisman hatching is one of my favorite interactions between a parent and a child in animation. I love that we have another parent character who's vulnerable with their child. Camila admits that she's made a flurry of mistakes throughout her life. Some small, some big. She was able to apologize to Luz for trying to send her off to summer camp, which was one of, if not the biggest criticism of her character. And I think that's gonna pay off in the finale, with the two of them nerding out together in the epilogue. Camila is love, Camila is life. Bellows. I said something similar in my breakdown, but Bellows definitely had a lot of my favorite moments in the episode because it was dark and edgy while shedding light on his mental state. The shithead is falling apart at the seams and seeing ghosts of everyone he's killed. He's running out of time, and consequences are rapidly catching up to him. But he still refuses to take responsibility for his actions. He's still hellbent on pinning it all on Caleb, pinning it on Evelyn, pinning it on every single witch alive. I hope his failed attempt at hijacking a Grimwalker's body has some terrifying payoff in the finale, because the Owl House is a horror comedy, and it's time to go all out and embrace the horror aspect of it. I'm mixed on him possessing Rain because, although it's a Galaxy Brain move to torture the audience and make viewers more invested, I was disappointed that Rain themselves didn't get time to shine in this episode. Same goes for Darius and Everwolf. That all clearly boils down to time, but it doesn't make it sting any less when Rain's taken over, because you know that possession was going to stick around for the rest of the episode, depriving Rain of actual screen time. I don't think the possession did the best job at showing just how manipulative he could be, since it just boiled down to the misunderstanding trope, instead of Bellows making a convincing argument. Also, I don't think we needed Odalia in this episode. I don't think she really added anything. She just raised everyone's blood pressure. Alright, it's time to talk about Hexside. But quickly, because it's my least favorite part of the episode. When Bartholomew first pulled up and took the game to Hexside, I was hype. I always love a good old-fashioned rebellion. And then we find out everyone in the school has been fighting an imaginary war amongst themselves. Bosch is an antagonist for some reason, and Kikimora's here. But the question is, why? Although Bosch is a mean girl, she hasn't been relevant in ages, and she's not someone the audience can really take seriously. And Kikimora is someone who's been hinted at redemption, as ultimately she's someone who just wants to be recognized for her efforts. She was just never going to get that from the Emperor's Coven. But instead of doing something interesting of her character, no! She's gonna be a leader now, commanding a bunch of kids, ooh. This all just feels like a pointless conflict and a detour that's meant to stall for time. And it's kinda whack. I guess if you were a fan of Basha in Season 1, you'd be happy to see her again, but Did you want to see her like this? I'm glad she made the right decision by the end of the episode, but I don't know who asked for any of this. And while I'm glad they were able to give Willow some time to shine and give her arc throughout the series some closure, something feels really artificial about how she gave Hunter a photo of Flapjack, him having an ambiguous sad reaction, and that leading to Willow spiraling. You gave him a photo of his friend who just died. Were you not expecting him to be sad? Even when I first watched this, I was thinking, what the hell is happening? I can see if Hunter was coming at her crazy or ripped up the photo, but he's just sad. But it's not like he wasn't already sad before. I could see if he was having the time of his life and Willow brought down the mood. But that's not what happens. It's like actively frustrating to watch the more you think about it. But hey, Hunt Low is off canon now, so congrats to the shippers out there. Okay, I'm moving on now. Leading up to the premiere of this episode, Disney Channel's marketing made it clear that Luz's talisman was finally going to hatch. And I'm happy to say, for me, this episode delivered on that hype 110%. I think the decision to tie the through line to Luz's arc with her talisman emerging was a brilliant decision. To tie Luz coming to terms with what she really wants, together with the final step in becoming a witch. And all Luz wanted all of this time was to be understood. Luz felt like a social reject on Earth, that everything she did was wrong. But suddenly, in the demon realm, she found a community of people who adored everything about her. People she formed bonds with, friendships that will last a lifetime. Even people who started out as enemies ultimately warmed up to her. And she thought all of that was lost when Belos revealed who he really was. That even after they took care of Belos and the Collector, her friends would hold helping Philip against her and abandon her. She thought that the people that understood her most wouldn't be able to understand the biggest mistake of her life. But her friends didn't abandon her. And after that pivotal conversation with Camila, the person she was afraid of rejecting her the most, she realizes that her mom finally understands her. And it gives Luz the connection and clarity needed to awaken her talisman. I've seen some people call out String Bean being a snake shifter as a cop-out, that the team behind the show didn't want to disappoint anyone, so instead of Luz's talisman being one animal, they decided to make it every animal. But I don't agree with this assessment at all. Yes, there's been plenty of hints since the very first episode that Luz's talisman would be a snake, right down to the logo. But there's also been plenty of hints that this talisman would be more than a snake. I think this special did everything right when it comes to introducing String Bean. From Luz's heartfelt epiphany to the staggering amount of power it wields. I can't wait to see String Bean in action, in all her snake-shifting glory, in the finale. For the Future may have dragged in some places with some questionable writing decisions, but I think it will be remembered for the highs more than the lows. And if any part of this trilogy of a finale was going to be the weakest of the bunch, I guess it's better for it to be the middle than the beginning or end. And again, they were working with very limited time, and they still have to cooperate with higher-ups. So I have no doubts the team did their best with this special. So, is the Owl House Season 3 living up to the hype? I'd say yes. For all my nitpicks and grievances, there are moments that I adore oh so much that I still think about on a daily basis. Whether if it's Thanks to Them's extended theme song, Luz's video diary, the Bunter fight, Belos seeing the dead, or String Bean finally hatching. And if this is just 2/3 of the way through, then I can't wait to see what more iconic moments are on the way in the series finale. It's clear that this season was made with so much love and care, and that they want to please the fans to the best of their ability. That about wraps up the review portion of this video. But if you really want to appreciate how much effort went into these specials, you gotta let me gush about the finer details and really break these specials down scene by scene. Starting now! Ready, set, go! We pick up exactly where we left off, as Luz and her friends are expelled from the demon realm and are left stranded on Earth. The status of the Boiling Isles and its inhabitants are still unknown by the end of this episode. We do not get a single peek into what's happened with King, Ida, Rain, Lilith, and so many other characters, as they're subjected to the chaotic force from beyond the stars, that is the Collector. Seeking refuge, the kids end up at Camila's door, allowing Luz to finally reunite with her mom. Also, I definitely mentioned this in the King's Tide breakdown, but Amphibious and Boonchoy makes a cameo through an article on Camila's iPad, questioning if Anne's disappearance is a hoax. Now, slight spoilers for Amphibia, but this gag, while not meant to be taken super seriously, I'm sure, is actually pretty consistent with the end of the series, where a handful of Earth's population actually believes that the climax of the series is a hoax. There's a total of 4 Amphibia Easter eggs throughout this episode, with the other 3 being a snail that looks like Bessie appearing during the rain sequence in the opening montage, Luz having a doodle of Polly in one of her notebooks when daydreaming about the form of her talisman, which feels like a very intentional choice since Polly's whole arc is built around metamorphosis. Hop Pop is spotted on a poster at the clinic Camila works at, which is also something I think could add up with Amphibia itself, since Hop Pop already became the star of a commercial while he was on Earth, so what's stopping him from being a pet clinic model at some point? And last, but certainly not least, someone's wearing a grime costume at the Gracefield Halloween party, which would be a sick costume in real life. I hope I see someone actually dress up as him this year. I wish Disney TVA was able to get into the Halloween market so bad, because if you've been to a Spirit Halloween in the last 5 to 6 years, then you know that franchises like Rick and Morty, Steven Universe, Kingdom Hearts, and so many others sell costumes and accessories. And while some of the costumes like masks or wigs can be horrifying, it's pretty cool to be able to buy stuff like Steven's shield, Rick's portal gun, or various keyblades, which just makes for cool decor more than anything else for me. And imagine being able to buy official Palisman staffs, glyphs, toad armor, and so on. We're being robbed of good merch, man. Robbed! Luckily, the MysteryShack.com has a lot of great unofficial merch. Not sponsored. Gus, Willow, and Amity help Camila around the house, leading to a brief but heartwarming moment where Amity is clearly shy and nervous around Camila because she doesn't want her girlfriend's mom to have a bad first impression of her. And Camila, without even saying a word, is able to provide reassurance. It felt like she already picked up on Luz and Amity being a thing. And that's what we call Mother's Intuition. This season premiere is centered around the fallout of not just King's Tide, but Hollow Mine. The episode where Luz and Hunter learned about Luz's role as an unknowing pawn in Belz's game by helping him when he was Philip Whittabane back in Elsewhere and Elsewhen. And lest we forget that this episode also revealed the truth about Hunter's identity as a Grimwalker, a clone of Philip's older brother, Caleb. Both afraid of how their loved ones will react to this news, they've been doing their best to keep it secret. But obviously things have gone from bad to worse, amplifying that fear tenfold, doubling down to protect the shocking truth from their friends. But unbeknownst to them, Gus at the very least is aware about Hunter after reading Belos's mind. This is alluded to later in the episode, but isn't fully explored here, but they would include that scene for no reason. So Gus's knowledge of Belos and what really happened to Caleb is something that might play a pivotal role in one of the latter 2 specials. Despite Camila's reassurance, unfortunately, they do have a reason to be afraid. Despite watching the Collector splatter Belos across the walls in what was a very horrifying yet cathartic moment of the show, the Emperor has survived, as a chunk of his goopy remains is still alive and conscious, making the trip to Earth with everyone else. Gus and Hunter set up their sleeping arrangements in the basement, and you already know the president of the Human Appreciation Society was going to waste 0 time before diving into the sea of human objects lying around. We also see Hunter's scout instincts at work as he strategically plans out his sleeping bed. It's kind of amusing how into it he is. Bro saw his uncle get Bill Nye from a solid to a liquid, and he's making sure he sleeps all of that trauma off. Luz's dress from the first episode appears, but is still stained, hanging above a sewing machine, so Camila is either going to repair it and then wash it, or just hasn't gotten to it yet. There's a few details related to Luz's late father throughout the basement. There's a box labeled Manny, a box that says Playa, which is Spanish for beach, and this box is indeed full of beach day things, such as a towel, sunscreen, a snorkel mask, and an American flag. So I'm assuming Luz, Manny, and Camila went to the beach every 4th of July. And there's a framed photo of Camila and Manny's wedding day. There's also nods to Camila's job as a vet with a bird cage, a frame of a fish, and a fake lizard for decor. Also, I need to take the L from a few videos ago. This is a Dominican flag. I goofed and called it the France flag in a promo breakdown, but from this angle, it's clearly the Dominican flag, and plenty of comments corrected me. How did that mix-up happen? Because I can be dumb. Simple as that. They didn't teach me world flags in public school. They just taught me about old dudes and American history I didn't care about because I wanted to go home and play Sonic fan games. Hunter thanks Camila by getting on his knee, which makes her insanely uncomfortable, showing the contrast between Hunter, who's used to doing this every day as a sign of respect before his leaders, and Camila, who definitely sees it as strange because that's not something too common in our modern day society, especially in America, and given the symbolism attached to taking a knee in recent years, Camila low-key might have found it to be a little tone-deaf, even though she knows the boy means well. Camila checks in on Amity and Willow, who are staying in Luz's room alongside V. The girls destroy an alarm clock after misinterpreting its noise, and a super sweet detail is V's note outside of Luz's room that reads, "Welcome home, Luz. We missed you." Camila finds her daughter at the end of the hallway in front of a bunch of family photos. These photos include Luz's middle school graduation, a few photos of Luz, Manny, and Camila together, Luz at one of her birthdays, Luz marking her height on the wall, baby Luz being tossed up to the air by Camila with Manny's hand also in frame, Luz cosplaying what looks like Cat Noir, with a few legal liberties, Camila cannonballing into a pool, hinting at her carefree, goofy side that we learn more about later in this episode, Luz on Christmas, and so much more. Luz begins to profusely apologize to her mother for running away to the demon realm, frantically trying to explain herself, but Camila, being the very understanding mother she actually is, reassures Luz that she's just happy she's safe and sound. But Luz finds it hard to be relieved when her friends are now the ones far from home. This takes us to the opening montage that both acts as our time skip and theme song for the special, featuring an extended remixed version of that banger intro. I wonder if each special is going to have its own little intro or montage, but honestly, with Disney posting this montage as the season 3 intro straight up, I think the theme song will be absent from the following 2 specials for the sake of time. They'll probably just have the super short intro that cuts right to the logo, or just flash the logo like in King's Tide. Don't get me wrong though, I'd love to see a full-fledged Weirdmageddon-esque intro for the other 2 specials where everything gets distorted by Bellows and the Collector. Keeping my hopes low though. Out of everything that we lost out in a full season 3, not to dwell on what could have been, not knowing what an Earth intro actually would have looked like probably hurts the most. Breaking down this montage, on my 3rd time watching this special, I noticed how it immediately parallels the season 1 intro, where instead of the portal door flying at the screen while opening on its own, the first thing we see here is the door of the abandoned house open as the kids set foot into their new base of operations. Also, I usually refer to this house as the old Wittebane house, and while this episode doesn't necessarily confirm or deny anything, it does seem to lean into the idea that maybe this house belonged specifically to Caleb, but more on that later. The Lumity ship name is embraced in the show's canon, as Luz presents a video by Lumity Studios to her mother. A coming out video comprised of photos that depict the growth of her relationship with Amity, and explaining to her mom that she's bisexual. Seeing them mutually fangirl over the Good Witch Azura books was probably the sweetest photo in the bunch. The other palisman noticed Flapjack diligently searching for something, which we later learn is the map leading to Evelyn and Caleb's stash of Titan's blood. Again, I always believed this was the old Wittebane house, but this solidifies that at the very least, this house was owned by Caleb. I'm now questioning if Philip ever even lived in it, and if this home was actually just for Caleb and Evelyn in particular. A vacation home for Evelyn, because its presence in the woods parallels it with the Owl House. The show isn't being subtle about Evelyn being an ancestor of Ida's, and that the two share quite a bit in common. So really, while being stranded on Earth, the squad swapped one Owl House for another. The kids decide to boost morale by sprucing up the place, hanging up doodles of their families waiting back home. And my favorite detail of this moment is definitely how Amity drew Alador, Edric, and Emira, but she left out she who will not be named.
Oh, Dahlia the prick.
Meanwhile, Hunter's the only one empty-handed, planting the seed for his conversations with Gus and Flapjack later in the episode, around him having nothing left in the demon realm, and how he's been much happier on Earth. Hunter's arc is clearly heading towards a certain direction, but we'll touch on that a bit more later in the video. Also a cute little detail, a possum rips through their sketch of a portal door, and immediately Amity's palisman Ghost chases after it. She's the only palisman with a smirk on her face. Very true to the nature of cats. The gang dabbles in fashion as Willow wears a tank top of Mabel's iconic shooting star sweater from Gravity Falls. Amity's hat and purple color scheme makes her look a lot like Vivian from Paper Mario, and Hunter's dressed up in a cardinal costume, foreshadowing how he and Flapjack become one thanks to Flapjack's sacrifice at the end of this episode. V also gets a new look, with light green and dark blue two-toned hair, alongside yellow pupils, based off of her color scheme as a basilisk. It gives me like Sonic characters as humans energy, Sonic characters as humans energy, but that's a compliment, I mean that in the best way possible. Hunter seems to be looking for answers about his origins by obtaining a book about the witch hunters of Graysfield, closing the medicine cabinet in the bathroom shut as his reflection in the mirror shifts from himself to Caleb Wittebane to Emperor Bellows mean mugging his nephew. a look that expresses intense anger and disappointment. Bellows feels betrayed once more, and he's out for blood. Now, in context with the rest of the episode, and how Bellows' essence would influence Hunter to see visions of his uncle, this moment could be a sign that Hunter's brief contact with the essence of Bellows at the end of King's Tide was already leading to psychological effects on Hunter. This crisis prompts Hunter to frantically cut his long hair before being caught by Willow. Hunter looking like his prototype character, Prince William. And adding fuel to the ship's fire, Willow takes over and gives Hunter a proper haircut. Jumping forward a bit, Hunter's rockin' the Rocco's Modern Life drip as the gang try to create a portal back to the demon realm. But without any Titan's blood, things seem to be hopeless. Now, Lumity dancing in the rain is some of the cutest shit I've ever seen in my life. But there's one thing about this scene that really perplexes me. Amity is acting as if she's cautious of the rain, which makes sense due to the occurrence of boiling rain back on the Isles. But the beginning of this episode shows that it was already raining when they got to Earth. Now look, I get it. It's just a cute moment for the sake of a cute moment. But it doesn't make any sense. And recognizing it's just supposed to be a cute moment won't stop it from throwing me out of the episode every time I watch it now. It's not that big of a deal, but I felt like I had to mention it. When the rest of the gang joins Lumity in the rain, the mud covering Hunter's head kinda makes him look like Monster Bellows. Notice that the mud ends at his shoulders too, making it look like Bellows' hair in that state. A visual Easter egg of what's to come later in the special. Amity creates a ball of light to help Luz mimic the series' main opening, which transitions into Luz failing to activate a light glyph that's surrounded by countless doodles of Ida, King, and Hootie, more of which Luz has above her desk. She clearly misses them. And remember, without the presence of a Titan, or as we learn in this episode, Titan's blood in itself, glyphs do not work on Earth. There's also a sticky note on Luz's corkboard that reads, "Love you, Luz," signed by Amity. Aww. Still pursuing her education, Luz spots the arrival of the school bus and grabs both her backpack and her unhatched palisman egg. As the camera follows a trail of leaves blowing in the wind, we get the fabulous Owl House logo, which now adds a fierce orange glow to the Albert emblem. Back at the abandoned house, the gang is seen practicing Spanish on an app that looks a lot like Duolingo. This isn't just a deep cut, people, it's a meme cut. Since season 1 of the show, Duolingo's social media has expressed a fondness for the series, even pushing the pairing of Duolingo and Hootie. Yes, you heard me right. Also, Duolingo is evil in this universe, I guess. Probably another layered meme reference. During this Spanish lesson, Amity remarks,
I was the top student once.
referencing her academic status at the beginning of the series, back when her and Luz were far from girlfriends. I like when they have these little moments that retain her competitive side, while also reminding us that she's come a long way. Everyone has an updated look after the time skip. Luz has longer hair that shows off her coral pattern, alongside her scar and Ida's Grudgeby jacket. Camila has a gray streak of hair, which I'm sure is a result of stress from raising 6 kids over the past few months. And like Luz, she also has curlier hair. At one point in the episode, we can actually see that she threw out her flat iron, hinting that spending time with the kids has led to Camila embracing her natural hair. She's also wearing a heart-shaped rainbow flag pin, presumably showing allyship, but I don't know. Maybe she'll get the hots for Ida or something, who wouldn't? Willow's new shirt has the Animal Crossing leaf on it, with the colors of her pants and long sleeve resembling that of a tree. Gus is wearing the magic amplifier he took from Adrian Gray as an earring, alongside a jacket. Hunter kinda just looks like Arthur, but really he's wearing the comfy Earth version of the Golden Guard fit. Finally, Amity is wearing an Abomination colored shirt, and overall similar to the color of the Hexside uniform. And lest we forget her longer hair, which exposes more of her roots as her hair dye is beginning to run out. Hunter has taken an interest in sewing, as it's something that makes him feel connected to his true father figure, Darius. A reminder of how Darius repaired the Golden Guard cloak and kept Flapjack's secret back in any sport in a storm. Flapjack's pecking creates a hole in the floor that Amity trips into, revealing that the Palisman was really searching for this box. The color of said box is confirmed to be a nod to the journals from Gravity Falls. Over at Graysfield High, Luz is sitting in class with her Palisman egg in her lap, and from this angle it kinda looks like a sleeping snake. I'd argue that this is another hint. The topic of discussion in Luz's class, as written on the chalkboard, is fate versus free will, the plight of the hero, which has more or less been a huge theme of the Owl House. Front and center here, as Luz projects onto the protagonist of the book they're reading. expressing through the material that she feels as if she's ruined her friends' lives, and that everything would be better if she never existed. Luz thought she was acting on her own free will, but her assisting Bellows was always set in stone. It was fate. However, she's failing to look at the bigger picture. She doesn't question if fate has her friends returning home in store, if everything is destined to work out in the end. She has the opposite problem of Bellows, whose arrogance and god complex has deluded him into believing that he's fated to destroy all witches in order to save mankind. We got a little callback to the series premiere as Graysville High's art room strictly prohibits things such as taxidermy, spiders, snakes, and fireworks, which were a part of Luz's previous book reports and art projects. Luz's locker has a few notable details. There's numerous drawings of Ida and King, including young Ida with her bright orange hair. The 2 ground photos can be spotted on the side, the newspaper of Ida getting banned from a cafe for wreaking havoc, which first appeared in the Season 2 episode Yesterday's Lie, and finally, there's a sketch of the light cliff. Now, whoever has a locker next to Luz gotta be confused as hell, trying to figure out what anime her locker is themed after. 2 students approach Luz and invite her to the Graysfield Haunted Hayride. These students are actually based off of crew members Mike Austin, aka the homie Mike Cat SU, and Bridget Underwood. As Camila drives Luz home from school, we catch some of her conversation with Luz as she tries to figure out satisfying alternatives for witch cuisines, but they're interrupted by the sight of a car accident where a woman claims to have hit a deer, but her daughter firmly believes that it's a monster. The camera pans over and reveals the bones of a dead deer with green muck dripping from the horns, conveying to the audience that Emperor Bellows has been possessing and feeding off of wildlife. Over in the Noceda household, Hunter sews together a shirt of his new favorite animal, wolves! Fun fact, this shirt actually exists in real life. However, our boy slips up and accidentally punctures a hole through his finger. This wound would turn out to be our boy's downfall, as it later allows Muck Bellows to directly enter his bloodstream. Hunter and Gus have a heart-to-heart that's prompted by Gus pointing out that Hunter seems way happier in the human realm. And I think this is exactly where Hunter will stay at the end of the series. His conversation with Gus reveals that he has nothing left waiting for him in the demon realm. He was just comfortable there because he had Bellows to tell him who to be. It wasn't something he had to think about. But he wasn't really happy in the Emperor's Coven. Bellows isolated him from his peers, and he was only allowed to leave the castle on weekends for missions. Which kinda explains why he was absent until the very end of Season 1. Hunter staying on Earth would be a powerful message, as we would not only see him continue to carve out his identity, but it conveys to the audience that you don't need to stay in the same place a traumatic event happened in order to heal. The conversation between these 2 brothers without mothers ends up reminding Gus of the Cosmic Frontier novels he's begun to read. Cosmic Frontier being a clear parody of franchises such as Star Trek and Star Wars, but mainly Star Trek, as evident by the character design. Hunter questions why anyone would want to go into space, which is ironic since Collector is said to be a child of the stars. This makes me wonder if we'll learn anything about the cosmos and the demon realm, and if there's time to learn about the Collector's origin. One of the characters in Cosmic Frontier is a clone who goes by the name of Chief Engineer O'Bailey, which might be a nod to the series' head writer, John Bailey Owen. Gus reveals that he's found a closet full of Manny's and presumably Camila's cosplay and collectibles. Being a cool nerd just runs in the family. Luz struggles to fall asleep as the overhead decor of her bed taunts her with its visual similarity to the Collector. And as she walks off into her mom's room, she unknowingly wakes up Amity, who finds Luz's invite to the haunted hayride. In Camila's room is a book titled Life Ain't Binary, showing that she's even doing research on gender identity, and we see that she's still figuring out what to feed the kids. And I guess that in the demon realm, apple blood comes from the apple butcher, which suddenly makes me feel weird about apples in the boiling aisles. Do they live in fear? Do they feel pain? Camila falls asleep and has a dream flashback combo that gives us a look into Luz's social struggles growing up. We learn that Camila has always stuck up for Luz and her quirks. She's always been endeared by the things that other parents were repulsed by, like how Luz had an adoration for shedded snakeskin, which is also another association between Luz and snakes. We witness a school play from the first episode again, but this time from Camila's perspective. There's an asshole wearing a Charlie Brown shirt behind Camila. I hope that guy has a bad day. It really does seem like Manny was a big goofball, as Camila says.
Heard that, Tutter, that one.
When Luz's fake guts burst out of her chest, which is crazy because this is one of the first things we actually saw pertaining to Luz, and it was inspired by her dad all of this time. We then see Camila meet with the principal, who believes Luz's behavior is the result of her grieving. She has no friends and her grades are inconsistent. Information that reframes the Owl House as a story of grief from the very beginning. Though, as a certified neurodivergent lad, bad grades and social issues can just be part of the course. But as Luz's video diary testifies later on in this episode, the bad grades does not mean that you're not applying yourself, but rather, you end up applying yourself to the things that matter to you. We learn that Camila used to be bullied, something that pressures her into setting Luz to reality check camp, which was actually the principal's recommendation. Camila was clearly unsure about sending Luz to this camp, so in a roundabout way, I think she's glad Luz ended up in another dimension instead. As Camila is awoken by Luz, we can spot a framed photo of Camila and V behind her, which I just find to be the sweetest thing ever. Luz has a heart-to-heart with her mom about running away to the demon realm. Luz questions why her mom isn't mad at her, and how Luz feels as if she's at fault for the situation her friends ended up in. But luckily, Camila gives her the reassurance only a mother can provide. On Camila's nightstand is a framed photo of a snake eating itself, aka the Ouroboros symbol, signifying the never-ending cycle of life. Add this to the pile of Snake Pal has been foreshadowing, especially with the egg set right next to it, still looking like a sleeping snake. But because happiness is a lie, we can't end this scene on a positive note, as outside of the Noceda household is a trail of animal bones that lead to Belos, possessing another carcass in order to continue his mission. This was clearly a carcass before the possession, which makes me wonder if his control over wildlife entails him eating other animals alive. Amity, Willow, and Gus decide to go on their own adventure to solve the map, putting on human disguises that is probably just an excuse for the designers to give them more outfits in this episode, with Hunter's disguise being less subtle than most, but arguably works well as a cosplay. People aren't gonna look at him and think, witch! They're gonna think, damn, the Earsphere Cosmic Frontier cosplay are really dope. They're so lifelike! There's an interesting dialogue between Gus and Hunter over the contents of Cosmic Frontier, about O'Bailey's secret clone and how Gus believes another character, Captain Avery, actually already knows. But before he can elaborate, Hunter cuts him off in fear of spoilers. I think there's definitely subtext here relating to Gus and Hunter to themselves and how Hunter is desperately trying to hide his true identity as a Grimwalker. But Gus already knows after reading Belos' mind in King's Tide. We're waiting for Hunter to come out when he's ready, rather than putting him on the spot. Amity and Gus get a head start while Hunter stays behind as he takes a moment to reflect on his journey of self-discovery, finally being comfortable in his own skin. But the moment comes to an abrupt halt when Flapjack notices a bit of Belos muck. This is where Hunter makes a fatal mistake by letting his scout instincts kick in, inspecting the muck with his open wound finger. This provides the first instance since the opening montage where Hunter begins to see apparitions of Belos. The Emperor's beast-like silhouette with glowing blue eyes appears in Hunter's reflection, confirming to the Golden Guard that his uncle has managed to survive. But also, where did his bandage go? Why is it back in the very next scene we see? Are you telling me he only took it off so this could happen? Meanwhile, the rest of the Hexite squad goes on an adventure throughout town. They consult the Magic Circle, with 3 Easter eggs I found worthy of pointing out. There's an illustration of a mouse leading an orchestra with the name Little Maestro, which I believe is either a parody of Disney's Fantasia, starring everyone's favorite Michael Mouse, or this apparent book series I found called Maestro Mouse, whose design is actually identical to this guy right here, but maybe it's just the weirdest coincidence ever. There's also a pack of Hex's Hold'em cards, something that first appeared way back in Season 1, so we can assume a copy of this game made its way to Earth thanks to Ida's shenanigans prior to the witch losing her portal door. Finally, 2 of the costumes in the shop are clearly Ness's clothes from Earthbound and Akko from Little Witch Academia. Gus and Willow get a good look at the statues of Caleb and Philip, exchanging a concerned and seemingly knowing look, as if they're piecing together that this town is the root of a very wicked evil. The kids search the library, which leads to a funny bit where Amity approaches the file cabinet, trying to appease it into opening up like the ones back in the Demon Realm, and getting absolutely spooked when a kid opens one up without second thought. They hit up the zoo, where they come face to face with giraffes, and learn why these animals were banished from the Demon Realm in the first place. Apparently, they're sensitive to flash photography.
Giraffes? Oh yeah, we banished those guys. Bunch of freaks.
After having a moment where everyone really misses their dads, V decides to pull out her in case of emergency break glass and leads them to the Gracefield Historical Society. But instead of finding Jacob Hopkins inside, they find Masha, who V previously became acquainted with while disguising herself as Luz back in the episode Yesterday's Lie. Masha's nails are painted the color of the non-binary flag, and they use they-them pronouns according to their nameplate. Masha reveals Jacob's been fired thanks to his god complex and insane antics, but he does have a small cameo later on in the episode.
These children are demon spawn, and they want your teeth!
Masha clarifies that the map is actually a rebus, a puzzle in which words are represented by combinations of pictures and individual letters. Amity, Willow, and Gus realizing that this rebus will lead them to Titan's blood. And after V realizes that this rebus aligns with an outdated map of Gracefield, the gang is finally on the right track to getting home. Luz is daydreaming at her mom's clinic about her talisman and what form it will take, with snake imagery outweighing the other animals, and as she packs up to head home, she makes contact with a sketch of a light glyph. The glyph having a very peculiar reaction, as if it was almost activated. Given that Luz is at her mom's job and not at home, this is our first clue that she's way closer to Titan's blood than she realizes. Hunter struggles to come to terms with what he saw earlier, vowing to keep Flapjack safe. Yet Flapjack tries to warn Hunter that Bellows has already begun to infest his body and mind. After meeting up with Luz, the two decide to storm the abandoned house and confront Bellows with some mass confidence. Luz equipped with a red baseball bat that has a striking resemblance to the glyph baseball bat in her beta design. Once the two hit the basement, however, they just find another possum. This brings us to one of the most emotional scenes of the series thus far, as Hunter and Luz confide in each other that they want to keep their friends safe. Luz referring to Hunter as family for the very first time. And a sea of people rejoice, as the Lunter ship was deader than it already was. I don't know why that was even a thing. Overwhelmed with emotion, Hunter breaks down. This past summer meeting Luz has led to Hunter experiencing genuine connections for the very first time. He finally has people who truly love and appreciate him for who he is, not for who he's supposed to be. But as the two exit the basement, we get confirmation that it's too late for Hunter, as Bellows has already begun his possession. Back at Luz's home, Camila gets flustered after seeing the kids get into her Cosmic Frontier collection and various cosplay, and this embarrassment from her really has me hoping that the series ends with Luz and Camila hitting up a convention together, both swagged out in cosplay. Amity pitches a Good Witch Azura couple's costume to Luz, referencing the apparent second movie as inspiration, and as I'm sure many of you recognized, we can spot a Nintendo Switch and ambiguous third-party controller on the entertainment console. Luz's guilt over helping Bellows leads to her recording a video diary in the dead of night. Her desktop background seems to be her own Lumity fan art of the two stargazing, as a watermark reads, "At Friends of Owls and Titans. Original art, do not repost." And on her desktop are a few familiar games and apps. Moon Farm Valley, a parody of Stardew Valley. Holler Knight, a parody of Hollow Knight. Hades, which is just straight up the game Hades, a game whose animated opening was provided by Spencer Wan's animation studio. Spencer Wan being the animation supervisor on season 1 of the Owl House. There's also U Movie, which is a clear parody of iMovie, and what Luz probably uses to edit her AMVs on. Luz vents into her video diary and comes to the heartbreaking conclusion that she has to stay on Earth once this is all said and done. The squad pulls up to the Gracefield haunted hayride, where Jacob tries to expose the kids for being witches, but instead catches a case. On the hayride itself, Masha reveals the tale of the brothers Wittebane, the origin story of Philip and Caleb. In the year 1613, over 400 years ago, the two arrived in town as orphans, with Philip being Caleb's younger brother. Over the years, they adopted the ideology of witch hunters in order to fit in. They needed to conform, which, as I said in my general thoughts of this episode, is a huge detail to have in Bellows' backstory, because he himself brought conformity to the Boiling Isles with the Coven system. Because Caleb was older and thus more emotionally developed than Philip, he was able to recognize witch hunting for how twisted and cruel it actually was, while Philip was successfully indoctrinated into this culture. What Caleb saw right through as unjustified hate, Philip took in as the truth. We also learned that the witch the two met along their travels was named Evelyn, someone who's very clearly a Clawthorn. Evelyn, Gwendolyn, Edalyn, how did they even get to the name Lilith? Poor girl. No wonder she went and cursed her sister. She just wanted a better name. Evelyn and Caleb fell in love, but Philip just wrote this off as his brother being deceived and brainwashed, embarking on a mission to save him from the demon realm. And the rest, as we know it, is history. Hunter becomes desperate to prove he's not going insane, and that Bellows is really here, exposing the Titan's blood surprise to Luz early. But when she's not fully convinced, Bellows' influence fully shines through, as Hunter commands Flapjack to retrieve the Rebus. It's pretty obvious that Bellows is itching to get back to the demon realm as soon as possible, after exacting some revenge along the way. But also, I think this struck a nerve because, much like Hunter not being fully believed here, I'm sure Caleb didn't believe Philip when Philip was desperately pleading for his brother to believe that Evelyn is evil. Obviously, Philip was wrong about that. This is just some food for thought. Elsewhere, Camila is cleaning up after the kids when she trips over Luz's baseball bat, causing her to literally stumble into Luz's video diaries. Starting at what appears to be 2 years prior to the series, maybe a year at the least, we see a younger but longer-haired Luz settling into her new room for the first time. She doesn't seem to be too content with her new living arrangements, and is shown to be much more observant than she lets on, as despite her mother's reasons for the move, Luz knows it's because there's a better hospital for her dad nearby, implying that Manny passed away from a terminal illness rather than a sudden accident. The next entry seems to pick up the day of Manny's passing, judging by Camila's immediate reaction to caress the screen, and Luz referring to the worst day ever. Young Noceda trying to remain optimistic as she mentions that Manny left her a book, the first installment of the Good Witch Azura series. The next entry shows that Luz has become completely infatuated with the series, already hanging up posters and drawings of Azura in her bedroom. Her favorite series, all this time, was a parting gift from her father. As Luz continues her hyperfixation with the series, we see that she also started getting into anime, as we can spot a poster for Spirit Devourer in the background, a riff on the anime and manga series Soul Eater. Luz has great taste. We learn that Luz's short hair came from her trying to get a fresh cut with the sword, but alas, things horribly backfired. Reaching the start of the series, Luz's room is full of more Easter eggs and references, such as the Domicile Sinister 4 poster, aka Resident Evil 4, a sketch of what I believe is Cloud Strife, and a few classic movies. Luz laments over her poor grades and that Camila feels as if she isn't applying herself, but Luz argues that she is applying herself, just to the things she finds interesting like taxidermy and cosplay, not junk like American history or math. Again, as someone with ADHD, this was very relatable, and is actually a pretty common thing with neurodivergent people. We're way more capable than how most people perceive us. But because we tend to gravitate towards things outside of the status quo, it's easy to be written off and cast aside in your younger years, because you have way less of a chance to figure out what you want to do and find something that works for you. Moments like this is why the Owl House is so important to so many people. People who felt rejected by society, and know that even if they don't fit into societal norms, there's other like-minded people out there that they do fit in with, who appreciate them for who they are. Sadly, Camila also overhears Luz's plan to stay on Earth and stay out of her friend's way, afraid that she'll screw things up. But of course, Camila won't let this be. Hunter's finger seems to be bleeding bellows goop as he removes a new bandage from it, and while he's getting wrapped up in the chaos of it all, Luz struggles to keep up. Deciding there has to be a better way to find Hunter and the Titan's blood, she has an epiphany. Glyphs don't work on Earth without Titan's blood, so if it tried to activate itself earlier, that must mean she's getting close. Sure enough, her light glyphs are finally starting to work. This brings Luz to the Graysville graveyard, where she meets Hunter, who's succumbing more and more to Bellows' control. As Luz pieces together that something's very off with her big bro, fighting Flapjack cowering near a tombstone, Bellows Hunter, or Bunter? You know what, he already has a cool design, let's knock him down a few pegs. Bunter makes his presence fully known, with a transformation that's gotta hurt. This possession was foreshadowed in episodes such as Any Sport in a Storm and Hollow Mind. Bunter finds the vial of Titan's blood, which has a cap that sports a striking resemblance to Albert and Hootie. I don't know about you guys, but this tells me that Evelyn might have had a hand in the creation of Hootie and the Owl House, or at least was the one who began the pattern of birthing things in the Clawthorne family. Luz and Bunter begin to battle, but Bellows recognizes that Luz is holding back in fear of hurting Hunter. As the rest of the crew arrives as if on cue, Bellows openly taunts Luz and thanks her for helping him find the Collector, which of course is a shock to her friends. The animation kicks into sicko mode, thanks to Tom Barkle, who also animated a few moments in the back half of Season 2. Something I notice is that Ghost's eyes become purple as she enters battle mode. Out of all the Palismen, they definitely gave her the most blink and you miss it detail. Gus reminds Bellows of their encounter in King's Tide, and Willow was able to pin Butcher's arm down long enough for V to fight for the first time. Bellows wanted to find out how Basilisk's still magic, and he finds out front and center, as V attacks him in a way that I can only describe as Kirby meets a goon from Infinity Train. However, Bellows retaliates, causing this moment to be rather short-lived. Hope we get to see V fight again before the finale, but the ending of this episode doesn't inspire confidence. Luz tries to get through to Hunter but gets thrown off by Bellows, and as Amity saves her, we can see that she actually uses earth mud instead of abomination goop. With this, it kinda makes sense that Willow was in the abomination track before the plant track, since both seem to be two sides of the same coin. As Bunter snatches Flapjack and attempts to zap his magic, he remarks,
"Goodbye, Evelyn."
which implies Flapjack might have been a gift from Evelyn to Caleb, or that they carved the bird together. Alternatively, given that Bellows mistakes Hunter for Caleb shortly after, it's possible that he was referring to Luz as Evelyn. But more on that in a bit. After Flapjack is fatally wounded, Hunter begins to fight off the possession and tosses the vial of Titan's blood into the lake. Bunter jumps in the lake after the vial, but tragically begins to drown. This could be a dark nod to Trial by Water, where accused witches would be thrown into rushing waters, their fates being left to a higher power. Camila retrieves Hunter's body as Bellows forces himself out of the vessel, Hunter's face being covered in new scars where Bellows' essence took over. Meaning, just like the animals Bellows possessed throughout the episode, Hunter was also being eaten alive by his uncle. Ugh, Bellows gives no fucks. Bellows questions why Caleb would stab him in the back, which has me thinking Bellows' mind is all jumbled up thanks to the back-to-back combo of Gus's mind trick and Collector painting the walls green. This may mean that when Bellows returns to the Isles, he won't be able to distinguish his memories from reality. Maybe he'll see Ida as Evelyn, or another witch. He'll mistake the Isles for how it appeared when he first arrived 400 years ago. I don't know, man, dangerous times ahead. Bellows uses the vial of Titan's blood to create a portal and escape to the demon realm, asserting that this is for the good of your souls. I already put a video out on what I think Bellows' plan is. He'll return to the Isles, hijack the Titan's body, and rumble Witchkind into dust. I'm scared. In the aftermath of the battle, everyone scrambles to Hunter before he passes on. Willow learning in the heat of the moment that Hunter is a Grimwalker. The wounded Flapjack, aware he's already dying, decides to sacrifice himself in order to heal Hunter, becoming one with his best friend. Some real Denji and Pochta antics. Hunter wakes up sporting brown eyes just like Caleb, instead of the pinkish red eyes of a Grimwalker. Now again, I already did my general thoughts of this episode that unpacked Flapjack's death, so go check that out if you haven't. Luz explains her history with Bellows and why she kept it a secret from her friends. But before she declares she's staying on Earth, Camila swoops in to declare she's joining Luz and the others in the Demon Realm, not letting her daughter fight this evil alone, now that she knows what they're fighting up against. Also, during this scene, I like to imagine Bellows is just hauling ass and booking it throughout the Isles. Like, not even being discreet, bro is just running for the castle. Amity repeats Luz's speech to her from when Luz first asked her out, as she tries to give her girlfriend reassurance for the future. Also, we officially get Good Witch Luz, so theory 50% confirmed. Let's see if the Collector or the Titan give her some temporary power in the finale. V stays behind to cover for Camila, and the special comes to a close as Luz braces herself for a final confrontation with Bellows. After Luz and friends were forced out of the demon realm by King, Luz swiftly opened and closed the door a few times, trying to get back to the Boiling Isles. Well, we see from the other side that the portal didn't just run out of juice or anything, which was my assumption. It straight up exploded into a million portal pieces, which might explain why the gang's attempt to power the same door with their palisman had such an adverse reaction. Aside from the lack of Titan's blood, they were trying to connect to basically nothing. Just a bunch of broken parts. The Collector whisks King to his side as he celebrates his newfound freedom, unleashing a storm of colorful constellations that terrorizes the Boiling Isles. I feel so terrible for all these people. First, their leader tries to wipe them out, and then like a half hour later, they have a different Armageddon in the form of an all-powerful child. Worst weekend ever. The Collector wants to know what this Owl House game King has up his sleeve really is. And sure enough, it's something a lot of people expected. A role-playing game where they reenact the many adventures Luz, King, and Ida have been on since Luz first arrived in the Demon Realm. Lilith, armed with Hootie, attempts to confront the Collector and get King to safety. I love that when old Hootzifer is a backpack, he can act as a little Hootie-copter. It's creative, and it got a good laugh out of me. After being in prison for over hundreds of years, the Collector is very overprotective of King, his proclaimed best friend. And he won't stand for the two being separated so easily. Going on the offense, Collector launches a crescent moon at Lily and Hootie, transforming them into puppets, sending them off into a castle in the sky, formed out of the top of the Titan's skull and the architecture inside of it. This has to freak King out, man. You find out you're literally living on your dead father, and now you're living in a castle that's made out of your dad? I don't know, that's too much, man. Toy transmutation is a trope you'd surprisingly run into more than you'd think, especially in anime, including the Pokemon anime. Why is this worth mentioning? Because I'm overconfident in the idea that if the Owl House team likes a property and the show does something similar to that property, then it must be intentional. I've said in other videos leading up to this special that the Collector's story reminds me a lot of Pokemon Movie 3, where a young girl named Molly loses her parents to the elusive unknown, who transforms her house into a giant tower, where she holds Ash's mom captive against her will. Molly's living in denial, using the power of the unknown to bend reality to her liking, struggling to come to terms with the notion that her parents are gone. I definitely still get a lot of those vibes throughout the episode, but the Collector turning everyone into puppets reminded me of an episode of the Pokemon Indigo League anime, where a trainer named Sabrina had the ability to turn people into creepy dolls. It's regarded as one of the scarier episodes of the series, just for how unsettling everything is. I definitely think the Collector could be drawing some inspiration from both Sabrina and Molly. Rain wakes up in Ida's care during the mayhem, surrounded by the collapsed Coven heads. Ida is now one-handed, as Rain chopped off her arm to spare her from the draining spell in King's tie. As we hear a fantastic reprise of Rain's Rhapsody, Ida shifts gears into Harpy mode and pursues the Collector, who spreads their magic all throughout the Isles. We see through a pentagram feed that civilians are starting to be seized by the Collector's underlings. Blue stars with piercing black and red eyes, zapping them into toys and transporting them into the castle. The Titan's carcass is flooded with a sea of magic. Alright, look, no shade at all, but we all recognize the pattern these Disney TVA shows have with their final arcs, right? The main setting gets a wicked facelift as the villain's domain looms above everyone, and they have their own specialized minions patrol the land to capture beloved side characters. And it's up to the main characters to find a way into said domain for a final confrontation so they can save their friends, save their families, and save the world. Gravity Falls did it, Amphibia did it, and now the Owl House is completing the trilogy. It's not like a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination, but when I saw those giant blue stars, I laughed just because those are just Bill's eye bats, turning people into toys instead of stone. But it's not like a bajillion video games don't also do something like this, so it's more of a pattern in storytelling that's bled over to animation. Before Ida can reach King and the Collector, her curse begins to flare up and restrain her from moving forward. This is the first time we've seen Ida affected by her curse while in her Harpy form, but it may be a result of the draining spell causing the curse to flare up. Ida tries to use the Lazifer elixir, but is halted by the Collector, whose delivery of this next line gave me chills.
You look fun. Wanna play?
Ooh, cold. As Ida lunges at the Collector, the Owl House logo is coated with a pink tint, with the emblem of Albert reflecting that of the Collector as it's half gold, half blue. I love it. After changing the logo for these first two specials, you gotta wonder what it's gonna look like for the final one. Maybe green with a hint of blue to represent Bellows? Or maybe silver to rep King. These are the things I think about at 2 a.m., eating out of a bag of shredded cheese. Luz wakes up in the in-between realm once more, as she's approached by a mysterious golden figure, eager to grab her attention. A little zoom and enhance, and you have what's undoubtedly a Titan. Now it is from a distance, so he's not the most rendered fellow, and it kinda looks like he has dad clothes on, but that just may be from a lack of detail. Still, we know if any Titan reached out to Luz in a mysterious realm in between planes of existence, it would more than likely be King's father, the Titan of the Boiling Isles. There's been moments all over the series that hinted at the Titan guiding Luz as she slowly masters glyph magic. Now he seems to be approaching her at a pivotal moment for Earth and the Demon Realm, as the fate of which kind, and humanity for being real, hangs in the balance. What does he need to tell Luz or give Luz? Maybe he could show her a super powerful, super secret glyph, or a way to defeat the Collector while minimizing damage. We'll find out in the final special, but I can't wait to see this thread finally pay off. I also wouldn't be surprised if the in-between realm is some sort of purgatory for Titans and maybe even Collectors. It would explain why King, once linked to the Collector, ended up here in dreams, connecting to his ancestors like an avatar state. But why is Luz linked to this realm? Was her ending up here in yesterday's lie really the result of a fluke portal? Or is she one of the only few people who has access to this realm, given that no one else got pulled here when going through the portal? So many questions, so little time. Amity recovers Luz, who tries to explain what she just saw, but instead tries to ask about he who shall not be named. Hunter calls out Luz, trying to avoid saying Belos' name, claiming that, unlike Voldemort, a swarm of ghosts won't appear if you say his name. Probably. Harry Potter reference aside, this could be alluding towards Belos seeing the dead throughout this episode, but it could also be a nod towards the final battle of the series. Would you be surprised if Belos commanded a swarm of ghosts to his side? Because at this point, nothing about that man surprises me. Also, we better see Camilla swing at him with a baseball bat, covered in glyphs. Returning to Bonesboro, the gang is caught off guard by its, whimsical appearance? And Camilla is alarmed by the giant skull.
Who knows if that monster is alive or not?
Yeah, I definitely think that thing's coming to life. Luz confides to her mom that she still plans on staying in the human realm after everything's said and done. Although Camilla is clearly trying to be supportive of her daughter spending time in this world, despite how much it scares her.
I love the fact that you've been living on a giant carcass.
Elsewhere, Belos is decomposing and on the brink of death, his rotting body melting away as he continues his wild hallucinations, haunted by his brother, whose soul is apparently trapped as a model sheet? That was a joke. But look at his line art compared to literally any other character. What? It just looks like they dragged in a Photoshop file. Which isn't an insult, everything in this episode looks great. Also, we got some blood with that dagger. Got me yelling at the TV. Belos places the responsibility of his terrible actions onto Caleb, refusing to own up to his actions, insinuating that if Caleb never fell in love with Evelyn, none of this would have ever happened. I'm sorry, thinking a baddie corrupted your brother's soul or whatever is the most beta shit I've ever heard. Belos the type of fellow to roll across the floor and shout, "Cooties!" because a goth girl brushed against his arm. Don't let this man enter a hot topic, or like, scroll through TikTok. Luz returns to the Owl House for the first time since the Emperor's Coven raid back in Season 2. Still abandoned and barren. Remember, they didn't just raid it in an attempt to arrest Ida, King, and Luz, but they also confiscated almost all of their belongings. Where's my boy John Luke? Willow gets a lot of focus in this episode, built around her tendency to keep her feelings bottled up, and how those feelings tend to seep out through her latent power. As shown when Camila tries to get Willow to open up, only for Willow to deny that there's anything bothering her. But the trail of plants rising up from the floor tell a different story. Willow believes she always has to be the level-headed, mature, and reliable friend of the group. She can't be vulnerable because she thinks she can only be the shoulder to cry on, and never the one crying. One thing this episode does with Willow to convey her nearing the breaking point is how often she's drawn with stress lines under her eyes. It's a good way to convey emotion and show us how she's really feeling, even if she claims the opposite. Amity finds Luz in Ida's nest, surrounded by light glyphs, calling back to the end of the intruder back in Season 1. Luz hopes laying in this nest of her palisman will help it hatch, but Amity reminds her of what the Bat Queen said back in Season 2's Hunting Palisman.
Kneel and state your deepest wish, and your like-minded partner will find you.
Connecting to your palisman requires expressing your deepest wish. For Amity and Ghost, Amity was forced to be honest and recognize that although her future is unclear, she knows she wants to choose that path herself, rather than doing whatever her parents tell her to do. Knowing this, I imagine it hit really hard for Amity when Luz asked her out, given that she said,
I have no idea what my future holds, but it would be so cool if you were in it.
Hunter believes he saw Ida and King, leading to everyone chasing them down to the town square. Fair, where they stumble upon a handful of puppets and the Collector's disturbing game of Owl House. A reenactment of the Intruder episode, with Terra Snapdragon taking the place of Ida. How'd she make it this far without getting Toys R Us? Camilla's first time on a staff also mirrors Luz's first time. I think that was a pretty neat detail, even though she looks horrified. This scene really helped me understand the Collector's thematic connection to King. Collector is like if King never grew as a character, but had all of the power that King sought after. They're both the last of their kind, and as a result, they both longed for companionship. But whereas King eventually crossed paths with Ida and later on Luz, people who had his best interests at heart and wouldn't be afraid to ground him in reality, the Collector had Bellows. Someone who never had his best interests at heart and had no problem telling the Collector whatever they wanted to hear in order to get whatever he wanted from them. King is the only one who's really in the position to talk to the Collector and steer them in the right direction. But sadly, it won't be easy. The group decides they have to make it to the castle before Bellows can reach the Collector. But they're sidetracked by the arrival of Bartholomew, Barkus, and Skara, who all seem to have really arced out. We learned that after the events of Labyrinth Runners, Hexside prepared for the Day of Unity and planned to lay low. But unfortunately, everyone with a sigil was still impacted by the draining spell. Once they were able to recover, the Collector's all-seeing stars swarmed the place thereafter, capturing numerous teachers and students, including Principal Bump and Bosch's crew. I love how when they're entering Hexside, the giant piece of wood reads, "No non-puppets allowed." But whoever painted this also made it a point to say that they love the Collector. Just got a good chuckle out of me. Hexside has become what I can only describe as the kids next door mixed with Lord of the Flies. Kids are running amok, eating stale moldy bread and fruit. There's a market with booths that sell novelty t-shirts and bootleg candy. It's absolutely wild. They even made a statue in memory of Principal Bump, which gives me Dabbing Ann vibes. Viney tells Willow that her orchids have become sentient and waged war against kindergartners, which, although played as a joke, is another example of Willow's bottled up emotions manifesting into powerful plant magic. Amity has a heartwarming reunion with her siblings, although Edric has seen better days. Notice how Emra's acne is visible and Edric is wearing his glasses, because in this apocalyptic times, they seem to have lost their concealment stones. They probably traded it for food over at the market. We also learned that Bartholomew's name is actually Matt Tholomew, as in Tholomew is his last name. This episode is blowing my mind. Meanwhile, Bellows has returned to the Skull of the Titan, using a secret underground entrance that takes him to the Golden Guard graveyard, where he sees the sight of Caleb and numerous Golden Guards haunting him, varying in height and hair. One of these Golden Guards actually appears to be the one that was seen helping Bellows in Hollow Mind, instructed by his master to burn down a village. Entering his Grimwalker laboratory, which has a dagger lodged into a book, Bellows finds one more Grimwalker cooking in the oven, possessing it without second thought. King and the Collector return to the castle, where they're greeted by... Odalia. How'd she make it this far without getting Toys R Us? Odalia tries to sway the Collector to use his powers for something closer to her liking, suggesting to remake the Boiling Isles to something that would definitely be in her image. But Collector swiftly shuts it down and demands her to make more pizza bagels! Moving to the Collector and King's bedroom, which was beautifully painted by the artist, I gotta give my kudos. We find that their beds lay on a tiny planet, which features its own gravitational pull. Reminds me a lot of King Kai's planet from Dragon Ball, which is also a small little planet that more or less operates the same way. Don't know if it was intentional, but it's cool to see. As the Collector gets ready for bed, he summons a gigantic book comprised out of stone tablets, requesting a bedtime story from King. Oh, this child is so lost. These tablets finally give us some highly anticipated lore on the Collectors. The excerpt King reads states, "Collectors live long, we watch things pass. To preserve, to observe, we must amass. What flies, what swims, be it predator or prey, seal them up so they may never fade. But should they meddle in our affairs, we'll clean the planet and scorch the air." So Collectors were a species of all-powerful celestial beings who seem to be near immortal, if not just live for a very, very long time, far longer than humans or witches. It sounds like Collectors dedicate their lives to, well, collecting different forms of life that they find interesting in order to preserve them for eternity. A species can't die out if they're preserved by the Collectors. collectors. And because life is finite, every race and species is valuable to the collectors. If we look back at the show's past, it's very likely they collect in different ways, with different abilities. The collector that captured the Owl Beast probably isn't the collector we've been dealing with. Not only were they a lot taller, but they collected by turning life forms into scrolls instead of puppets. I wonder what all the other abilities the collectors have. Could they turn someone into a Funko Pop? An amiibo?
NFT.
Now that would be scary. But should anyone stand in the way of the collectors, the celestial beings will eradicate them all from existence, which happened with the Titans, who presumably weren't okay with any of their people being turned into a scroll or a toy. This is where our collector seems to be different from the others, as he looks at their history with great shame, altering the text to say that it's better to make friends, and that playing together is way better than war. And you know what? He's right. He actually wrote this revision over an illustration of an unknown race making an offer to the collectors. Although these are depicted as orbs, they could be stand-ins for anything really. It could be wildlife, it could be pets, it could even be children. There's a lot of dark implications at play, and it seems like the Titans were really the first ones to stand their ground and fight for their freedom against the collectors. The collector wants to sleep with Francois, but King is hesitant and reminds collector that Luz is the only other person allowed to touch him, which clearly upsets the collector, who's formed a grudge against Luz without even getting to know her. He's clearly afraid that Luz will steal King from him, ruining the friendship they have. The collector needs to learn that people can have more than one friend, or even a best friend, and that it's okay for him to open up to more than one person as well. That's right, the solution's gonna be friendship, but at least Bellows will have a gruesome death, probably. Back at Hexside, we learn that Basha has become president of New Hexside, going on a power trip, as she has definitely not Kikimora whispering into her ear. I won't lie, Mickey definitely had me fooled for a good minute, but it was easy to figure out what was really going on the more she kept talking. The fake backstory really gave it away.
My little sister and I found ourselves hiding here after the incident.
Basha and Mickey reject Luz's help, but luckily, she has an idea. As King traverses the halls of the castle, he passes by portraits that depict the collector's backstory, similar to how we learned Bellows' backstory in Hollow Mind. The origins of the collector seem to date back to the Big Bang, as the right side of the hallway, or the left, if you want to look at it from King's perspective, is all portraits of an explosion, the planets, the sun, and the moon. For those who don't know, the Big Bang is a physical theory that explains how the universe expanded from the initial state of high density and temperature to the array of planets and stars that we have now. Kikimora referred to the collector as a child of the stars, and that seems to be literal. He and the rest of the collectors were the direct result of the Big Bang, which kinda makes sense. If this event created planets suitable for life, especially in the Owl House's universe, why wouldn't it also create actual life that embodies the cosmos themselves? These portraits also imply that the sun and the moon are actually alive, as the sun is illustrated with a face complete with two eyes, while the moon is illustrated with a single eye. Given that the collector's face appears to be half of the sun and half of the moon, I'm getting the vibe that collectors could be born from the two colliding, some sort of eclipse. So his true parents, if anything, would be the literal sun and moon. Our collector was definitely born at a later point from the rest, given that he's depicted as small and purple instead of tall and blue. The collectors eventually set their sights on the demon realm. Unlike other planets that let the collectors walk all over them, taking whatever they want from whoever they want, the Titans of the demon realm weren't going to stand for any of it, waging war against the collectors to disastrous results. At some point during this war, collectors inadvertently formed the Titan Trappers, as we see 3 of them don the skulls of Titans, which to me says they were going to collect from this planet, whether the Titans were dead or alive. Brutal! As the war raged on for an indiscriminate amount of time, our collector came into the fray, but instead of wanting to fight, he just wanted to play with all the little Titans. A relatively peaceful collector who was surrounded by nothing but death, destruction, and absolutely terrible influences. This is why the collector is so playful and innocent, yet destructive and careless. It's hard for him to differentiate harmless playing from lethal battle, which is how you get fun games like tag. As time passed, the collectors and the Titans drove themselves into extinction, with only King and our collector left. The collector getting sealed away by King's father in order to protect King, who was hidden away on an island far from the Boiling Isles. What an intense backstory for such a little guy. King bumps into Odalia and requests to have Hootie in his possession, before finding Ida amongst the Covenhead's collection, who simply wanted to pay Rain a visit. God, they're so in love! I want them to be happy! The first thing you'll notice about Ida is that she has a new hairdo, with much shorter hair. It's a return to form given that she had this look when she first found King, as seen in Echoes of the Past. It's also kind of a role reversal. Back then, Ida had to look after King, but now King has to look after Ida. And honestly, this has me terrified. Not that she isn't rocking it, Ida can rock just about anything, but it's undeniable that this haircut matches up with the silhouette of Caleb's lover, Evelyn. Considering Belos is on his last legs and can barely tell apart reality from his memory, already mistaking Luz for Evelyn, he's almost guaranteed to mistake Ida for Evelyn in the finale. And I don't think his response is going to be anything but violent. Ida and Lilith have been laying low since the Collector took over, as the Collector believes Ida is still transformed as the Owl Beast. As for Lilith, clearly King convinced Collector to free her at some point, but we're really lacking the specifics on how that happened. We also learn that the puppets retain a little bit of sentience, as Hootie is able to recognize and communicate with Lilith, which has some dark implications for Rain later in the episode. Bartholomew reveals that he's been plotting in the photo lab, leading to one of the coolest callbacks of season 1, as the photo memories from Understanding Willow make a return, using the magic pliers to find the memory of Belos' transportation glyph that transported him in and out of the Titan's skull. Speaking of Belos, his attempt to hijack a Grimwalker of Caleb goes awry, as the body isn't stable just yet. We see the flesh of the Grimwalker melt away as Belos struggles to maintain the form before he abandons it entirely, assuming the body will be ready in the finale. It looks like we'll be getting Hunter versus Hunter after all. But going off script for a sec, could the reason why this Grimwalker's falling apart have something to do with the fake Selkie-Damas scales that would have been delivered to Belos? Because if you remember, in the season 2 premiere, Ida and Luz staged the Selkie-Damas slaying. Selkie-Damas scales is one of the ingredients for a Grimwalker. So if Belos doesn't have the real deal, it makes sense why this body wouldn't be ready, aside from not having enough time to cook in the oven. Decomposing faster than before, Belos makes a mad dash for the castle, almost giving us the sweet release of Odalia's death, but instead, the Emperor decides to shatter my heart into a million pieces by hijacking Rain's body. I kid you not, this was so out of left field for me that I literally screamed at the TV. After finding the memory they need, Willow hands Hunter a photo of him with Flapjack. This overwhelms Hunter with emotion, which throws Willow off guard. Instead of making him happy, she was met with melancholy. Gus confesses to Hunter that he already knew he was a Grimwalker ever since reading Belos' mind, but he was waiting for Hunter to talk about it when he was ready. Now he's questioning if waiting was the best move. Yeah, Gus, you did the right thing, but you probably should have said something on Earth. You guys had like 3 months. It could have came up. Basha corners Willow into a trap, which leads to Mickey revealing herself as Kikimora? I totally didn't expect that at all. What? The Owl House sure is full of surprises. I don't know if I like Basha or Kikimora being in their villain era this deep in the series. Honestly, it just felt like they needed to end this episode in a certain place, and this is how they decided to pad out the time. Kinda held back on an otherwise fantastic episode for me. But if you're a fan of Basha, or a fan of Kikimora, I'm sure those exist, then you are probably happy. Bane approaches the Collector's bedroom with a green scar forming on their cheek, mold covering their ear, and Belos goop oozing from their eye. This has me terrified. We know that when Belos possesses a life form, he's eating away at that host to sustain himself, killing them slowly. That's why Hunter was covered in brand new scars after Belos ditched his body. Belos was eating his body alive. This same horrifying thing is happening to Rain's body while Belos is in control. So someone needs to catch him to the act and get him out of there fast, before there's nothing left of Rain to save. Bane attempts to possess the Collector in their sleep, presumably trying to take over so they can use the Collector's all-powerful magic to wipe away Witchkind in one fell swoop. But the Collector catches on to this disturbing presence and questions why a puppet was brought to life without his involvement, in which Bellows BS's his way into living another day. Side note, Rain's hair falls forward here in the exact same way that Dana drew them a while ago, which I speculated would be their look in this episode. And I was kinda right, just a little off the mark on the details. Kikimora throws Luz, Amity, Camila, and Bartholomew into a pit, where she goes in for the kill. Camila tries to go for an ice cliff, but instead makes more of an ice grenade. Not a bad first attempt. I definitely think they're paving the way for her to cover her baseball bat in glyphs next episode, bringing everything full circle. Basha pleads for Amity to come back to the Mean Girl squad, desperate to have her back by her side, but Amity obviously declines. You know, there's a whole apocalypse scenario she's got to worry about instead. Amity and Bartholomew pull an old switcheroo, using the same illusion trick that Gus used to switch Hunter and Luz's appearance back in Clouds on the Horizon. Amity makes one more plea to Basha for their freedom, but before we get an answer, it's time to switch scenes. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I hate the misunderstanding trope, and I was shook to see it be the catalyst to the final conflict of the series here, as Bane courses the Collector into spying on King, causing Collector to hear just enough to make it sound like King's gonna pull a classic George and Lenny.
Tell me about the Stone Sleepers, King.
When in reality, King just plans on talking things out. You really couldn't have the Collector keep the speakerphone on for a few more seconds? Really? Once again, we see that the Collector feels genuine remorse for the eradication of the Titans, as he reacts with a deep sadness when King references the event. I think that remorse, that piece of his consciousness, will be pivotal in turning the tides and winning him back over in the finale. We also learn that Titans can nullify Collector's magic with their own powers, so we may see King forced into a situation where he has to fight the Collector in order to save everyone. Which honestly might be a little upsetting to watch, because I genuinely like the Collector when he's not being a menace from hell. Camila and Luz have a heartwarming moment together, where Camila shares all the time she's felt like she's messed up, apologizing to Luz for not standing up for her at the start of the series, trying to protect Luz from the trouble she faced by making her conform to the norm. But she recognizes this was wrong. She loves her daughter for who she is, and she should have just let her be herself. This apology helps Luz come to terms with her own baggage, her own internal conflicts, as she realizes that all she ever wanted was to be understood. She thought that no one understood her in Gracefield, even her own mother. So she ran away to the demon realm, surrounded by people who did understand her. But thanks to Bellows' manipulation, she was left feeling like she was responsible for the pain and suffering of those who connected with her. But now, through this journey to stop Bellows once and for all, and through this conversation with her mother, Luz finally recognizes that she is understood by her mom, and that making mistakes is just a part of life. She isn't someone who weighs everyone else down. She's a beautiful soul, a shining light that pierces through the darkness. And with this epiphany, Luz's talisman finally hatches, initially taking the form of a sparkling purple orb. Meanwhile, Willow is struggling to be vulnerable with herself and her friends, causing Gus and Hunter to get wrapped up in her plant magic. But as she begins to succumb to her own negative thoughts, entrapped in her own magic, Hunter activates a parting gift from Flapjack, the Talisman's magic, bringing the Naruto reference full circle. Hunter fans rejoice! Hunter confesses that Willow and the rest of his friends mean the world to him. He just wasn't ready to say it. Gus encourages Willow to let out everything she's been holding in, releasing her magic as a result. It's healthy to talk about your emotions. Who knew? The gang converges and faces off against Kikimora together, before the Hexside kids pull up to the scene, revealing that Basha decided to do the right thing after all. The Hexside kids distract Kikimora, while Luz and friends form the spell glyph, with the reprise of the Amity vs. Hunter theme in the background that had me moving and grooving. An absolute bop. Shout out to Brad Breek. Everyone arrives to the Skull of the Titan, where Luz's talisman finally evolves into its true form. Is it a bird? Is it a snake? Is it a bat? The answer is all of the above, but it's primarily a snake. It's a snake shifter. Yeah, we were right. No big deal. All in a day's work. Just kidding, like everyone figured that out. But yeah, meet String Bean, everyone! Luz's dope-ass talisman. Huntlow fans around the world scream at the top of their lungs as the two hold hands, or fingies. But everything isn't all peaches and gravy, as the Collector and Bane watch from above. Luz's presence ticking off the Collector so much that he says it's time for a new game. His eyes glowing red as he snaps his fingers, bringing the penultimate episode of the series to a close. We get a lot of cool illustrations in the credits that give us some context to a few things in the episode. Basha and Bartholomew butting heads over how to run Hexside prior to Kikimoro's arrival. The Collector and King having a tea party with the puppified Coven heads. Darius Everwolf hanging there. And probably the most important, King hugging Ida in her Owlbeast form, with Lilith's puppet right next to them. The Collector watching from a distance with a look of concern on his face. He recognized King's sorrow in this moment and presumably decided to free Lilith from the nightmare that is being a living doll, while also deciding to spare Ida. Basha went into hiding after the Collector's all-seeing stars arrived, comforted by Kikimora, who managed to sneak her way in amongst all the chaos. We see that Ida decided to give Lilith her new haircut, although King's unsure of her approach. But hey, Lily's a redhead again! And we see King reflect on the past as he longs for his old life with Luce, Ida, and Hootie, knowing that even if they get out of this, nothing will ever be the same again. Last but not least, we have the Collector floating outside of the Titan's skull. Which, I don't know, the ominous music makes me think he might try to do something with it. There's only one episode left, and things are intense. What's going to happen to the Boiling Isles? Luce, King, Ida, Amity, Gus, Willow, Hunter, Rain, and all the others. Are we going to see Bellows kick the bucket brutally? God, I hope so. We're officially in the endgame, and I can't wait to break down the final episode of all of you in a few months' time. But for now, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode. What are your thoughts? Where do you see things going for the finale? After Season 3, Episode 2 of The Owl House, there's a question I've seen pop up that, when trying to figure out a solid answer, actually really got me thinking about the finer details of the series. That question is, why Rain whispers? Of all the people to possess, why did Bellows settle on the character who already had a little mind control storyline not too long ago? Why did the writers go with this idea? And the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Honestly, I think you could take this question further than possession. Why did Bellows really keep Rain around after they were exposed for treason? Why did Bellows even elect Rain to become the head of the Bard Coven in the first place? Rain has gone through hell and back, and it may just feel like they're getting bullied by the Owl House crew, but I think it all really drives a point home. Bellows really hates Evelyn. Now you might be thinking, but Kevin, what does Caleb's girlfriend have to do with any of these characters in the present day? Everything! One word, projection. Bellows has always projected onto the people around him. We all know he views Hunter and all the other Golden Guards as his chance to control Caleb, to finally be the big bro in charge and quote-unquote protect Caleb from going down the same path of defiance that he did before, at least in Bellows' eyes. This projection has become more direct and more shameless as Bellows has entered this hallucinatory state he's currently in, straight up calling Hunter and Luce Caleb and Evelyn and thanks to them, probably referring to Luce as such because of the current length of her hair matching Evelyn's. Not to mention Luce is dressed up like a witch, alongside the fact that Luce is a human who's in a relationship with a witch, whereas Evelyn was a witch dating a human. With all of this in mind, knowing Bellows projects onto others and holds onto grudges for as long as humanly possible, or inhumanly possible in this case, let's talk about Ida. It's been pretty obvious that Ida is a descendant of Evelyn. I mean, come on. Idalyn, Evelyn, the matching red hoods, the implication that the Owl House used to belong to Evelyn, the implication that Evelyn was just as hot as Ida.
Sounds like Big Bro got a hot witch girlfriend and Little Bro got upset.
There's just no denying it. That being said, Bellows and Ida have an interesting dynamic in the sense that they don't really have one. Bellows has captured Ida, upped her bounty, and had her home raided, yet these two have only interacted once, in Young Blood, Old Souls. You'd think a dude who loves tormenting people who remind him of his past would have an entire squadron dedicated to harassing Ida. But he doesn't, because Bellows doesn't try to mess with Ida's head by interacting with her directly. He messes with her head by toying with her loved ones. Take Lilith, for example. Yeah, Lilith cursed Ida of her own accord, but they were at odds before Ida even knew her sister was the one responsible. Because, regardless of the curse, the Emperor's Coven always put a wedge between these two sisters. And I think that's exactly what Bellows wanted. Lilith was his second in command during Season 1, in which she was constantly tasked with arresting her sister. He dangled the false promise of curing Ida's curse once she was brought to him, when in reality, he was plotting on turning her to stone, which he might have known would have been a bust anyways, given that he was well aware that Lilith and Luz had to survive long enough to travel back in time and help him discover the Lyclith back when he was Philip Woodabane. Still, whether if he knew or not, I'm sure he was happy to hear that Ida and Lilith both lost their magic, because at the end of the day, he views it as one big middle finger to Evelyn. And what happens not too long after Ida's failed petrification and Lilith leaving the Emperor's Coven? The old leader of the Bard Coven is suddenly retired under vague circumstances, almost as if he was forced, and Rain takes his place. Bellows loses one way to emotionally manipulate Ida and immediately replaces it with another. Yeah, that's right. I believe Rain was specifically chosen as head of the Bard Coven for no other reason than Bellows knew they and Ida were an item. And he knew that, at the very least, seeing Rain in such a position would really bother Ida. Where Bellows goofed up is that he severely underestimated how resilient and how rebellious Rain truly is, which may be his undoing in this current circumstance. It's so telling to me that Bellows decided to just have Rain brainwashed after finding out that they were staging a coup, Kikimora feeding the excuse that there isn't enough time to find a replacement, when Darius had the exact opposite information and clouds on the horizon.
Bellows made sure we all have replacements.
What did he mean by this? There's also the fact that neither Luz nor Ida would want Rain to get hurt just to stop Bellows, which we saw firsthand in Follies at the Coven Day Parade. It would be better for them to just try and break Terra's spell, although Rain never needed saving in the first place. Perhaps Bellows knew Rain was faking it, but felt that they would be the key to weeding out Ida for the Day of Unity, and that regardless, they would all perish under the draining spell. But either way, I do believe this is all the accumulation of a multi-century beef with his brother's girlfriend. Of course, there's no denying that when it came to actually possessing Rain, Bellows saw an opportunity to get revenge on Rain directly for their constant defiance. But now Bellows himself, through this possession, has that immunity from Luz and Ida. Once they realize what's happening with Rain, they're gonna avoid hurting him. But at the same time, Bellows still gets his petty revenge against Evelyn by hurting her descendant's loved one. This possession eats at the host until there's nothing left, evident with the countless animals he bodyjacked on Earth and Hunter's new scars. There's a limited window of time they have to save Rain, as we already saw Bellows' essence bleeding out of them. It's ironic that Rain is the head of a coven that plays with strings, only for Rain to become a literal puppet in a situation where Bellows is pulling the strings. Alright, real quick, there are some things I missed in my For the Future breakdown that I want to point out here. The Collector's new castle above the Titan's skull effectively looks like a crown, which is so perfect, especially in the context of King, that I really don't see the castle going anywhere. I kind of expect it to stay up by the end of the series. Not only does Camila have Luz's exact same reaction to riding a staff for the first time, but she has the exact same reaction to meeting King. And I misinterpreted the sign out of Hexside. I thought it was banishing anyone who wasn't a puppet, but instead they were trying to make it look like there was nothing but puppets inside, hence the pro-Collector propaganda. Last but not least, a lot of people have pointed out that Ida's reaction towards meeting the Collector was likely the Owl Beast itself responding to seeing another Collector after being turned into a scroll by one before. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you find anything else, let us know. So is Bellows just hallucinating the presence of everyone he's ever wronged? Or is Smelly actually seeing ghosts? Let's talk about it. I absolutely love ambiguous storytelling. Things that are left up to interpretation for the viewer to decide. There's no clear-cut answer, no takeaway that's right or wrong. All you have to work with is what's presented to you and your own brain. It's why John Cena's Instagram is so magical. No caption, no fluff, just pure art. Which brings me to this scene in For the Future that I can't stop thinking about, where Bellows, on the brink of death, sees his brother Caleb Woodabane stand before him, with the bloody dagger that Bellows ended his life with floating above him. Bellows, of course, does the whole "do not mock me" thing, blames all of his actions on Caleb, and tries to push through. as his body falls apart at the seams. Later on, we see that this extends beyond Caleb, as every single golden guard Belos has ever destroyed are now all haunting him in what looks like his final moments. Now, I just wrote this off in my breakdown as a hallucination and nothing more. But here's the thing, there's no solid confirmation of that, and the more I think about it, it really could go either way. The Demon Realm is a place full of boiling rain, living appendages, and portals that spawn throughout the land at random, capable of sending you anywhere through time. So ghosts aren't the most far-fetched thing imaginable. Now, as far as I can remember, I don't think we've ever had concrete evidence of ghosts in the Owl House, but there's a first time for everything.
I have more school spirit than the school spirits!
Why do I even bother?
So I just wanted to make a case for both scenarios because, again, I've been thinking about this scene a lot. It's really effective and drives home the kind of person Belos is. The kind of narcissistic a-hole he cemented himself as. Refusing to admit he can do any wrong, and a refusal to have any kind of perspective. It's his way or the highway. So why do I lean towards this being a hallucination? Well, Belos began to hallucinate towards the end of Thanks to Them. And that seems to be a result of his rapid deterioration, getting flattened like a pancake by the Collector, and V draining a bit of his magic. He can't hold himself together, physically or mentally. This of course leads to him referring to Hunter as Caleb, but also a little bit earlier in the episode, right before he mortally wounds Flapjack, he seems to refer to Luz as Evelyn. I've seen a lot of comments asking me, when did he call Luz Evelyn? And I believe it was this moment. Yes, he could have just been projecting onto Flapjack, as Flapjack seemed to be carved by Evelyn as a gift to Caleb. But keep in mind that in this moment, he was looking right at Luz, who was not only dressed up as a witch, but after growing her hair out a bit, her silhouette does have a striking resemblance to what we've seen of Evelyn. I don't know. I do think the idea of Belos calling out Evelyn knowing she's not there, but then immediately mistaking his nephew for his dead brother, it doesn't make as much sense as it does for him to mistake both Luz and Hunter for two of the people he resents the most. I wouldn't be surprised if through his eyes in that very moment, he really did see Evelyn, Caleb, and some random witches. So it does make sense that this hallucinatory state would keep up, as he's literally melting, struggling to find a new body, leading that repressed guilt to manifest into what he sees as ghosts. Sounds simple enough, right? But there is one thing in this episode that makes me think that all of these ghosts could be real, and that's the look on Caleb's face as Belos brushes past him. It's a look of sorrow, almost a little bit of regret, as if Caleb was really there thinking, man, I really failed him. I could have stopped him from going down this path. Which brings me to the argument of why these could be ghosts. Again, we're in the Demon Realm. It's not the most far-fetched idea, especially when you have the carcass of a giant titan showing loose different glyphs all across the aisles. There's clearly a level of supernatural intervention at play. Second, and this is the big one in my opinion, we know that Belos isn't just consuming the magic of Palisman. It's way more than just an essence. As directly stated and shown to us in Hollow Mind, Belos has been actively consuming, for hundreds of years, the souls of Palisman, which led to the creation of this disturbing monster form. The Bane of Magic. It kind of reminds me of the belief that kids can see ghosts because when they're younger, they have a much greater sense of awareness and can pick up on energies and events that most adults wouldn't notice. Whether or not you believe that to be true, we could kind of apply this concept to Belos. That the more Palisman souls he's consumed, the stronger of a tie he has to a different plane of existence. A spiritual plane. One that causes him to be haunted by the past. And if this is the case, I think he saw Caleb and all the other Golden Guards in this moment because they're trying to stop him. They see that he doesn't have much time left, and they want him to go out with a little bit of dignity. They want him to stop causing this pain and suffering. Caleb and all these Golden Guards know that if Bellows continues this path of destruction, then the cycle of hatred will just continue. It's a little heartbreaking to think about, but as always, these are just my thoughts and I want to hear yours. Do you think Bellows is actually seeing ghosts, or nah, are you sticking with hallucinations? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going by giving us a follow at Roundtable Vids and at Fox on Instagram and Twitter. If you enjoyed this video, please throw it a like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. See ya!